Chapter 2307 Tier 3 Abyssal Blade. The moment Shurfeng tapped on the Evolve * button, the Abyssal Blade transformed into a cloud of black fog that moved toward his bag. The black fog began to devour every mana crystal in his bag like a ravenous wolf. The mana within the mana crystals was only slightly less pure than within 7 Luminaries crystals, and a single mana crystal contained enough mana to obliterate a small town from the face of the continent. When the Abyssal Blade devoured all 100 mana crystals, space around Shurfeng trembled violently with the transfer of such a frightening amount of energy. At the same time, a dragon's roar echoed across the island. It felt as if space were about to explode, making room for a dragon's arrival. Is this a backlash? Shurfeng's expression darkened. With every evolution, there was a chance that the magic weapon would release a backlash, and each backlash would be stronger than the last. If the weapon's owner couldn't cope with a single backlash, it would cripple their account. Initially, Shurfeng had been confident of contending with a potential second backlash, but based on the mana fluctuations he sensed, he doubted that he had more than a 50% chance of surviving. Fortunately, the mana only fluctuated for a few moments. After 3 seconds, the island returned to normal, and a pitch-black sword, decorated with engraved draconic patterns, appeared some distance away. Despite standing 5 yards away from the Abyssal Blade, Shurfeng could feel the magic weapon's intense dragon might weighing him down. His heels even sunk into the ground. Abyssal Blade. One-handed sword magic weapon. Attack power plus 4055, all attributes plus 320, attack speed plus 33, ignore levels plus 25, attacks have 70% chance to cause 250% damage. 40% chance to cause 300% damage. Every attack increases damage by 2% to a maximum of 30%. If wielder belongs to a swordsman-related class, all skill levels plus 6. Increase free ability points received for every increase in level by 2 points. Equipment level 80. Can be upgraded. Devour 40 level 85 dark gold weapons to upgrade to level 85. Equipment Tier 3. Can be evolved. Devour 5 god crystals to evolve to Tier 4. Additional active skill 1. Phantom Kill, Tier 3. Instantly creates a doppelganger under the wielder's control. Doppelganger has 95% of the wielder's attributes in all skills. The wielder can swap positions with the doppelganger at any time. Duration 2 minutes cooldown. 5 minutes additional active skill 2. Abyssal Bind, Tier 3. Binds up to 5 enemies simultaneously and prevents movement, reducing defense and magic resistance by 100%. The higher tier the target is, the weaker the effect will be. Duration 5 seconds cooldown. 40 seconds additional active skill 3. 9 Dragon Slash, Tier 3. Instantly creates 21 phantoms of the Abyssal Blade for wielder's use. Each phantom sword deals up to 80% damage. Duration 60 seconds cooldown. 8 minutes additional active skill 4. Abyssal Curse, Tier 3. Prevents all targets within a 100-yard radius from moving or attacking for 6 seconds, and reduces their attributes by 20% for 10 minutes. Effect doubles if there is only one target in range. Cooldown 30 minutes additional active skill 5. Dragon Soul, Tier 3. Grants a doppelganger a dragon soul, transforming it into a black dragon. The transformed doppelganger will have the same life rating as a black dragon, and can use the skill Dragon Breath. Duration 5 minutes cooldown. 24 hours additional passive skill. Abyssal Will. Improves wielder's physique depending on the surrounding mana density. The higher the mana density, the greater the improvement. Additional Profound Inheritance. Black Emperor, Tier 3. When activated, every critical hit will accumulate 1 stack of Death Aura. Each stack can be used to increase all attributes by 4% and attack speed and movement speed by 3% for 12 seconds, or to reduce the cooldown of a skill by 5 seconds. Maximum of 27 stacks of Death Aura. Duration 10 minutes cooldown. 6 hours. The famed Smithalises personally created the Abyssal Blade using the Black Dragon King's fangs as material. It is one of 36 famed swords, ranking 31st. However, the Black Dragon King himself has cursed this sword. Beyond the immense strength the blade offers, the wielder must face a backlash after a certain amount of time. However, after Jack had remodeled the Abyssal Blade with a star crystal, the strength of the backlash has been reduced greatly. If the wielder is unable to suppress the backlash, the wielder will receive the Black Dragon King's curse, permanently reducing all attributes by 50%. Unable to be dropped. Unable to be traded. Unable to be destroyed. So powerful. Shurfeng was stunned when he saw the evolved Abyssal Blade's attribute panel. The Abyssal Blade's attributes might not compare to the Twilight Blade and Killing Ray quite yet, but its attributes could rival that of a top-tier level 85 epic weapon, despite being only a level 80 magic weapon. However, the improved attributes weren't the most shocking aspect. The Abyssal Blade skills had drastically improved now that it was a tier 3 weapon. Now it was the perfect weapon to use against groups. Not even an ordinary fragmented legendary weapon would be its match in this regard. Seeing the tier 3 Abyssal Blade, Shurfeng couldn't even imagine how much it would improve once it reached tier 4. Of course, evolving the magic weapon further would be immensely more difficult than it had been thus far, requiring God crystals, and 5 of them at that. One could only rely on luck to find God crystals, which were even rarer and more difficult to locate than epic weapons. Shifeng then unequipped Killing Ray, replacing it with the Abyssal Blade. So, this is the Abyssal Blade's power after another evolution? As he equipped the magic weapon, Shurfeng was astounded. His attack power and basic attributes might have decreased, but he was more compatible with the Abyssal Blade than he was with Killing Ray. The weapon felt like an extension of his body in his hand, and it was now unimaginably sharp. In its current state, the Abyssal Blade could easily slice through a level 100+ Great Lord's scales. Moreover, the magic weapon's effects had substantially improved, and he could feel his physique growing considerably stronger. Despite replacing Killing Ray with a lower-leveled weapon, his overall combat power hadn't decreased in the slightest. Rather, it had risen. After taking a moment to familiarize himself with the upgraded Abyssal Blade, Shurfeng shifted his attention to the graves within the inner region. The goal of his promotion quest was to locate the Lost Blade Saint Legacy. Obviously, it should be inside one of those graves. The countless forgotten spirits wandering through the forest and the heroic spirits guarding each grave were the only obstacles in his way. A few minutes ago, Shurfeng had been helpless against the wandering forgotten spirits, but now that he had the tier 3 Abyssal Blade, defeating the undead wouldn't be a problem. Now, he only had to figure out a way to distract the heroic spirits while he opened the graves. Unfortunately, since he didn't know which grave contained the legacy, he decided to challenge heroic spirit guarding the nearest and smallest grave. The instant Shurfeng crossed through the translucent barrier, the undead roaming near the chosen grave sensed Shurfeng's aura and charged toward him. Although the forgotten spirits didn't have very high intellect, even a peak expert would have to flee if several dozen attacked together. Go! Shurfeng immediately activated 9 dragons / Like a group of experts, the 21 Abyssal Blade Phantoms flew forth to open a path for Shurfeng. Although each phantom only possessed 90% of Shurfeng's strength, the attribute was just as high as an actual level 100 tier 3 players. As a result, the Abyssal Blade Phantoms effortlessly suppressed the approaching forgotten spirits. With one exchange, the phantoms shoved aside the several dozen undead, allowing Shurfeng to reach the small grave. This is a resting place for the dead. The living have no place here. The spear-wielding tier 3 heroic spirit guarding the grave bellowed as he thrust his spear at Shurfeng. Forgotten heroic spirit. Undead tier 3 Berserker King. Level 10 HP 540000/54000000. Although the heroic spirit did not have a lot of HP, he employed an advanced combat technique with that simple thrust, causing his opponent to ignore the weapon unconsciously. Moreover, the attack contained peak tier 3 power, easily enough to repulse level 100+ Grand Lords. If this attack struck a tier 3 player, they die instantly. Witnessing the heroic spirit's strength, Shurfeng lost any confidence in defeating the undead. Fortunately, he didn't actually plan to fight the heroic spirit. Shurfeng responded to the attack by using Phantom Kill, sending his doppelganger forward while activating Defensive Blade to block the strike. Shurfeng then rushed toward the grave. The moment Shurfeng touched the grave, a prompt window appeared before him. System. Do you wish to activate the grave and absorb a portion of the grave owner's legacy? Ecstatic, Shurfeng activated the grave. However, a loading bar appeared the moment he did. Activating the grave would require a total of 8 seconds. When the heroic spirit sensed the grave's activation, he flew into a rage. Ignoring Shifeng's doppelganger, the heroic spirit dashed toward the offending player. Sure enough, this won't be that easy. As the heroic spirit ran toward him, Shifeng stopped holding back. He had his doppelganger activate its legacy berserk skill, Blade Liberation, focusing all of his attention on controlling the doppelganger as it attacked the heroic spirit. Lightning flash. A web of sword lights enveloped the heroic spirit, yet the undead didn't seem concerned in the least. He spun and met the attack with his spear. Thunk, thunk, thunk. The sounds of clanging metal echoed throughout the forest. Not only had the heroic spirit blocked every sword light the doppelganger had sent at him, but he managed to do so without stumbling a single step backward. The doppelganger wasn't a match for the heroic spirit, but Shifeng didn't care. His only goal was to delay the Tier 3 heroic spirit for 8 seconds, not defeat him. Shifeng finally absorbed a portion of the grave owner's legacy as he sacrificed his doppelganger. As he did, a legacy completion rate section had appeared in his quest window. System. Legacy completion rate 15%. Do you wish to accept this legacy? So that's how this works. Shifeng immediately understood how he was supposed to complete his promotion quest. Every grave in this lush forest contained the Blade Saint legacy, but each grave contained a different completion rate of the legacy, which couldn't be combined. It was up to him to decide how much of the legacy he wanted to leave with. Following which, Shifeng abandoned the completion rate he had acquired from the small grave and escaped through the barrier. The moment he crossed the magic barrier, the forgotten spirits and heroic spirit chasing him gave up and returned to their original positions. Now that he understood his quest's mechanics, Shifeng set his sights on the higher quality graves in the island's inner region. Naturally, the more magnificent graves were guarded by stronger heroic spirits. The largest grave sat within the forest's core, as opulent as a palace with a level 100, Tier 4 heroic spirit standing guard. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The graves that were a grade inferior to the palace-like grave in the center were protected by heroic spirits with titles. Heroic spirits that earned a title after their deaths had been heroes among heroes during their lives. Killing apex experts of the same tier would have been child's play. Although they had lost a significant portion of the strength after death, they could still kill apex experts with little to no effort. I can only give it a try. Shifeng gritted his teeth as he set his sights on a greatsword wielding, titled Heroic Spirit. He knew he had no hope of activating the grandest grave in the cemetery. The gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 existences was massive, let alone the gap between Tier 2 and Tier 4. The moment the Tier 4 heroic spirit noticed him, he'd die. However, he wasn't willing to settle for third-grade graves. After all, the legacy's completion rate would severely affect the Tier 3 promotion quest's rewards. At the very least, he had to try for the second-grade graves. Once his skill's cooldowns had finished, Shifeng dashed into the inner region once more, running straight for a grave that was the size of a small high-rise. Chapter 2308 Abyssal Blades Might. Shifeng's target was near the center of the forest. Simply approaching it would be incredibly difficult due to the groups of forgotten spirits that moved closer together near the forest's core. If Shifeng relied on his own strength to reach the grave, he wouldn't get close to it, much less activate it. Several hundred forgotten spirits flew toward him, and Shifeng felt his scalp go numb. Fortunately, he was barely able to keep the forgotten spirits out of attack range with the 21 abyssal blades fighting for him. 9 Dragon Slash had a time limit, however, so he couldn't stop the undead like this forever. Although Shifeng was confident that he could escape these monsters with his life, if he couldn't keep the forgotten spirits at bay, that would be it. He wouldn't be able to do anything more. If he wished to secure the second-grade legacy, it was crucial that he utilize 9 Dragon Slash's duration efficiently. It took me 42 seconds to reach this grave, which is about as long as I estimated. Glancing at 9 Dragon Slash's remaining duration, Shifeng breathed a sigh of relief. I should be able to activate the grave within the remaining time. There were 2 reasons that Shifeng had passed up the highest grade grave. Naturally, the first was the Tier 4 heroic spirit that guarded it. His second reason was the lack of time. Reaching and activating the second-grade graves within 9 Dragon Slash's 60-second duration was his limit. Before Shifeng could catch his breath, the silver-armored, greatsword-wielding heroic spirit that guarded the gravestone abruptly opened his eyes. A faint, red barrier then enveloped the gravesite, decreasing Shurfeng's basic attributes and physique by 20%. Urdia, Flame Knight. Heroic Spirit, Tier 3 Berserker King, Level 101 HP 78, 000, 000/78, 000, 000 A domain. Shurfeng's expression darkened as he stared at Urdia. Shurfeng had assumed that Urdia had the strength to instant-kill Tier 3 players, but he had never thought that the heroic spirit would be this powerful. Urdia might not have a lot more HP than the heroic spirit he had fought earlier, but he was definitely much stronger. Purely regarding basic attributes, he had to be 30% stronger than the forgotten heroic spirit. In combination with its domain, which only Tier 4 NPCs and above could grasp, Urdia could squash Tier 3 players like ants. I commend your bravery, adventurer. Over the several millennia I have stood guard. You're the first to dare approach in search of the Blade Saint's legacy. I hope you can offer some entertainment, Urdia leisurely commented. Unlike the forgotten heroic spirit, which had attacked immediately, he joked around like a player as he slowly approached Shurfeng. Seeing this, a chill crawled down Shurfeng's spine. They might be dead heroes, but heroic spirits weren't considered NPCs in God's domain. Because of this, their intellect shouldn't be as high as NPCs. However, that was obviously not the case for Urdia. This was also the first time Shurfeng had encountered such an intelligent heroic spirit. Seeing that Urdia was already 50 yards away, Shurfeng activated the Ring of Gospel's miniature world and Ring of Brilliance as a precaution. Unfortunately, Shurfeng could tell that wouldn't be enough after the two skills had taken effect. He then activated Blade Liberation to bolster his basic attributes further, and at the same time he activated the Twilight Blades Twilight of the Gods and Twilight's Shadow, splitting into 8 clones. With Twilight of the Gods and Blade Liberation active, Shurfeng's physical doppelgangers inherited the skill's effects. Now, every one of his doppelgangers had the strength to rival Grand Lords of the same level. If 8 level 100 Grand Lords worked together, they could even take on a level 100 mythic monster. However, before Shurfeng could control his doppelgangers, Urdia vanished, reappearing before Shurfeng's clones. The heroic spirit brandished his flaming greatsword, sending 8 crimson sword lights at all 8 doppelgangers. Shurfeng's doppelgangers reacted quickly, intercepting the attacks with their swords. However, the moment the crimson sword lights met the doppelgangers' blades, the impact threw them over a dozen yards before they slammed into the ground, their swords humming. Each doppelganger instantly lost over 20,000 HP. A bronze combat technique? Shurfeng's expression turned grim when he saw the outcome. Extreme Slash. Although Urdia had only executed 8 Extreme Slashes, one fewer than Miracle Dragon's 9 Extreme Slashes, Urdia's mastery with the technique was far greater than Miracle Dragon's. He had mastered the advanced combat technique until he had upgraded it into a bronze combat technique. This was a Tier 3 heroic spirit that could use bronze combat techniques. No one would have believed Shurfeng if he had told them about Urdia's abilities in his previous life. Some might even mock him for his stupidity. Heroic spirits might have once been heroes, but they weren't anymore. They particularly lacked intellect and weren't even a match for ordinary NPCs regarding this aspect. Seeing a heroic spirit execute an advanced combat technique was already quite impressive. Most Tier 3 NPCs couldn't even master a bronze combat technique, much less a Tier 3 heroic spirit. And yet, the impossible had just happened. After repelling the 8 doppelgangers, Urdia shifted his gaze to Shurfeng's main body. He executed Flame Charge, transforming into a fiery meteor as he flew toward the swordsman. Based on how this flame charge appeared, Urdia's skill completion rate should be 99% or 100%. Shurfeng didn't dare take Urdia's charge head-on. If the heroic spirit had already thrown his doppelgangers, he could definitely send Shurfeng flying. Shurfeng activated Phantom Kill, summoning another doppelganger, and having it activate Blade Liberation and Defensive Blade to intercept the approaching Berserker King. If he died during his Tier 3 promotion quest, he'd have to wait a long time before he could challenge it again. It was a risk he wasn't willing to take. However, the moment Shurfeng's doppelganger activated Defensive Blade, Urdia cancelled his flame charge and thrust his flaming greatsword into the ground. Dozens of fiery blades rose from the dirt, flying toward the doppelganger. Tier 3 skill Storm Garrote. Defensive blade's block counts were exhausted in an instant. Seeing this, Shurfeng had no choice but to focus most of his attention on his doppelganger and executed Sword's Orbit. When the galaxy of stars and the flaming blades met, both attacks shattered. Although the doppelganger had successfully blocked the attacks, it had been forced to stumble over a dozen steps backward. Moreover, each attack had devoured nearly 10,000 of the doppelganger's HP. With just one skill, Urdia had dealt over -200,000 damage. As they kept the forgotten spirits away from the gravesite, the Abyssal Blade Phantom's duration continued to decrease, and Shurfeng's doppelganger couldn't keep Urdia distracted. It began to make Shurfeng even more nervous. If he activated twofold Berserk, he could hold Urdia off, but he needed to activate the grave with his main body. There was no point in trying to distract the heroic spirit himself. He intended to reserve absolute domain for his escape from this place. Even if he activated the grave and obtained the legacy contained within, he would fail his quest without it. Your doppelgangers are quite good, but this is as far as you'll get, Urdia declared, chuckling when he realized Shurfeng's doppelganger had survived his Storm Garrote. Urdia pulled his greatsword from the ground and appeared before the doppelganger. He executed 8 extreme slashes once more, but this time he concentrated all 8 attacks on a single target. Dragon Soul. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Shurfeng understood that if his doppelganger died, this quest would come to an end. Hence, he decided to use the Abyssal Blade's strongest skill, Dragon Soul. Right now, every attribute point mattered. Shurfeng's doppelganger roared, the sound filling the entire forest. As it did, the doppelganger transformed into a 10-meter-tall, pitch-black dragon. It had more than doubled in size than when the Abyssal Blade had only been a Tier 2 weapon. Seeing the 8 sword lights fly toward it, Shurfeng's doppelganger swiped a single claw to block them all. Boom! The sword lights slammed into the doppelganger's claw, and an intense shockwave shook the forest, only fading after extending 100 yards away. A spatial tear had even appeared before the dragon's claw, and the doppelganger only stumbled a step back. Chapter 2309 Blade Saint Legacy secured so strong. Shurfeng was surprised to see his doppelganger only lose a little over 5,000 HP after receiving Urdia's 8 extreme slashes. Although his doppelganger had already been quite powerful with Dragon Soul active, nearly invincible among beings of the same tier, it had grown even stronger, especially its strength and defense. In these 2 attributes, his doppelganger could practically rival Tier 4 mythic monsters. Moreover, the size of the black dragon's body afforded Shurfeng plenty of advantages. Before the black dragon's 10-meter-tall frame, Urdia looked like little more than a small animal. The doppelganger wouldn't have any issue stopping the heroic spirit's attacks. However, Urdia didn't pause after his attack failed. He immediately appeared before the black dragon's head, his flaming greatsword transforming into a colossal pillar of fire. Tier 3 taboo skill Burning Sword. When the fire pillar completed its transformation, it stretched across 100 yards. The black dragon looked tiny before the flaming weapon, and Urdia swung it down on the doppelganger. Not even Shurfeng could escape the pillar's range, much less the black dragon. Don't think I'm so easy to kill. As the fire pillar descended, Shurfeng had his black dragon use Dragon Breath. Unlike the Dragon Breath skill from his Heavenly Dragon's Breath Ring, the black dragon's ability was the real deal. According to legend, a Tier 5 Dragon Breath could vaporize an entire city instantly. The true Dragon Breath was easily more powerful than any taboo skill or curse, essentially rivaling divine arts. The black dragon opened its maw, and a horrific amount of mana concentrated between its jaws. In the blink of an eye, a pitch-black energy ball as large as a small house had taken shape, and as the black dragon released a deafening roar, the energy ball reformed as a pillar of pitch-black light, firing toward the heroic spirit's pillar of fire. Boom! The dragon breath and burning sword slammed into each other, creating a shockwave that shook their surroundings and didn't dissipate until it had spread 500 yards away. At the point of impact, space had crumbled, forming a black hole. It felt as if Armageddon had begun. Sure enough, the true dragon breath is far more powerful. Shurfeng could not help but be astonished when he saw Urdia being sent flying. Shurfeng had only hoped that the black dragon would stop Urdia's killing move. He hadn't actually expected the doppelganger to win that exchange, dealing over -30,000 damage to the heroic spirit. Urdia wasn't in danger of dying after losing 30,000 HP, but it was enough damage for the black dragon to hold the heroic spirit's aggro. Now, Urdia's focus had turned away from Shifeng's main body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Shifeng charged at the gravestone. System. Do you wish to activate the grave and absorb a portion of the grave owner's legacy? Without any hesitation, Shifeng activated the grave the moment the prompt window appeared. Like the previous grave, a loading bar appeared when he activated. However, this loading bar required 12 seconds, rather than the 8 seconds the previous grave had required. Shifeng celebrated the fact that he had decided to keep absolute defense in reserve. Had he used the skill to stop Urdia, rather than rely on Dragon Soul, he would have died halfway through the activation process. Unfortunately, the instant Shifeng activated the grave, Urdia went berserk. Ignoring the black dragon, the heroic spirit dashed toward Shifeng. Only a little over 100 yards separated Urdia and Shifeng, and a titled Tier 3 heroic spirit would only need a few steps to cross that distance. However, the black dragon intercepted Urdia near the halfway mark, using its massive frame to keep the heroic spirit away from Shifeng. The black dragon then swiped a claw at its foe. The black dragon's claw was the size of a car, and although Urdia sensed the incoming attack, he couldn't dodge it in time, relying on his greatsword to block it. As the claw slid along the massive blade, dazzling sparks flew from the weapon. Urdia knocked away the black dragon's claw with his greatsword. Now he fully displayed the strength of a Tier 3 heroic spirit. Even a Tier 2 dragon would find him a difficult opponent. Fortunately, there wasn't a particularly large difference between the two combatants' basic attributes. Although the heroic spirit had knocked away the black dragon's claw, the dragon steadily remained in its original position. It had only taken a little over -2,000 damage from the clash. The black dragon had tens of millions of HP, so this amount of damage was nothing. Realizing this, Urdia stopped relying on brute force to break past the black dragon. Instead, he executed a combat technique, transforming into 7 phantoms that charged at Shifeng's main body. Advanced combat technique, Flowing Shadow. The 7 phantoms looked and felt exactly the same. Not even Shifeng could tell the difference. But he wasn't ready to give up just yet. In response, he executed Lightning Slash through his black dragon. As a bronze combat technique, Shifeng even had trouble executing Lightning Flash with his main body, not to mention with a doppelganger. But the black dragon's physique was far superior to his, so Shifeng barely managed to pull it off. 14 claw strikes then plowed into the 7 phantoms. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Metallic clangs echoed through the cemetery as Urdia blocked all 14 strikes. The black dragon lost over 30,000 HP and stumbled a step back, but it had achieved its goal and stopped Urdia's advance. Only, Shifeng had paled from the effort of executing Lightning Flash with the black dragon. To consume so much concentration, Shifeng could feel a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He had expended significantly more concentration when executing the bronze combat technique through the black dragon than when he used the technique himself. Of course, Urdia hadn't given up. He executed Flowing Shadow again, trying to reach Shifeng. With no other options, Shifeng continued to rely on Lightning Flash to stop Urdia. 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Every time Shifeng executed Lightning Flash, a considerable portion of his concentration slipped away. By the time he executed the technique for the 6th time, he felt mentally lethargic. However, he still needed 5 more seconds to complete the activation process. By the time Shifeng executed Lightning Flash a 9th time, his complexion was as white as paper. He felt a stinging pain in his head, and the world seemed to spin around him. Now he couldn't even control the abyssal blade phantoms to stop the swarming undead. A large number of forgotten spirits flew toward Shifeng, and Urdia circled the black dragon, appearing before Shifeng's main body. The heroic spirit swung his flaming greatsword down on the swordsman. 8 extreme slashes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. 8 massive sword lights appeared and threatened to devour Shifeng completely. When the 8 sword lights were only an inch away from him, Shifeng gritted his teeth and activated Absolute Domain. Golden, divine runes immediately began to appear on his body. As the 8 sword lights crossed that final inch, They came to an abrupt halt against the divine runes, unable to touch Shifeng. With absolute domain's protection, neither Urdia nor the Forgotten Spirits could harm Shifeng. Needless to say, they couldn't stop Shifeng from activating the grave either. System. Legacy completion rate 85%. Do you wish to accept this legacy? Chapter 23:10 Urdia vs. Anna. As soon as he saw the system notification, Shifeng accepted the legacy. He didn't know how good a legacy with an 85% completion rate would be, but it was undoubtedly better than the 15% legacy he had found earlier. After Shifeng accepted the legacy, countless divine runes began to flow from the grave toward him, forming a glowing imprint on the back of his hand. Suddenly, Shifeng bore the mark of a purple-gold sword. The moment the mark formed, Urdia descended into madness. His muscles bulged, and a cloak of fire enveloped his frame. The temperature around him soared, and the flaming cloak burned the earth under his feet to black ash. If Shifeng hadn't activated Absolute Domain, he'd likely lose astonishing amounts of HP due to his proximity to the heroic spirit. With Urdia going into full berserk mode and his Absolute Domain's duration almost up, Shifeng switched the 7 Luminaries Ring's Aura of Earth to the Aura of Wind and activated Gale Domain to make a hasty retreat. While all forms of teleportation were prohibited in the Void Land's inner area, flying, fortunately, was not. Gale Domain was Shifeng's only hope of escaping from the inner area. Without it, he wouldn't have any chance of leaving the inner region even if he had the legacy. He no longer had 9 Dragon Slash to rely on, and he had a titled Tier 3 heroic spirit after him. However, before Shifeng could leave the grave, Urdia charged forth like a meteor. The heroic spirit was so fast that not even the black dragon could stop him in time. Boom! Urdia crashed into Shifeng, and the golden, divine runes that protected him actually trembled. This hadn't even happened when Urdia had hacked and slashed at Shifeng earlier. The heroic spirit proceeded to brandish his flaming greatsword at Shifeng, over and over. For a moment, even Shifeng was helpless against the countless sword lights. He couldn't keep up with the speed of any of these attacks. Urdia's attack speed wasn't that much faster than his, but he couldn't keep up with the heroic spirit's reaction speed. With Urdia's basic attributes, the heroic spirit could finish Shifeng off in 2 or 3 hits, even if Shifeng activated twofold berserk. Absolute Domain only had 6 seconds remaining, and Shifeng was still nearly 1,500 yards away from the inner region's barrier. Throwing caution to the wind, he flew straight for the barrier. Despite the fact that Urdia couldn't fly, the undead had no issues keeping up with Shifeng, continuously attacking the fleeing swordsman. Every one of Urdia's attacks had enough power to injure mythic monsters. Shifeng would have already died several times if it hadn't been for Absolute Domain's protection. 5 seconds. 3 seconds. 1 second. Unfortunately, Shifeng's flying speed was fast, but he couldn't reach the barrier within 6 seconds. He was still roughly 500 yards from his target when Absolute Domain's effects wore off. As soon as they did, Shifeng felt a scorching heat envelop his body, dealing minus 10,000 damage per second. Seeing the divine runes fade from Shifeng's body, Urdia sneered at his prey. He pushed off the ground and arrived before Shifeng in an instant, plunging his flaming greatsword down on Shifeng's head. 8 extreme slashes. This time, every one of the 8 sword lights contained Tier 4 power. Not even the black dragon would be strong enough to block the attack, much less Shifeng. Fortunately, Shifeng had prepared for this moment and activated Defensive Blade. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Another series of metallic clangs echoed throughout the forest. Urdia had exhausted over half of Defensive Blade's block counts in that one exchange. By the time Defensive Blade ended, Shifeng had only moved 50 yards closer to the barrier. As Urdia was about to launch another attack, Shifeng activated Abyssal Bind. Over 20 pitch-black chains emerged from the void, binding Urdia and forcing the heroic spirit to a grinding halt. At Tier 3, Abyssal Bind could hold a target for up to 5 seconds, and it should be 100% effective against a Tier 3 being like Urdia. It was also Shifeng's final trump card. Pung! However, before Shifeng could relax, he heard the sound of a chain shattering. When he had gone berserk, Urdia had become nearly stronger than a mythic monster. It had only taken the heroic spirit an instant to shatter one of the chains. As if they were made of paper, The other chains began to break, one after another. For the crime of desecrating a saint's grave, you will die. Urdia bellowed as he swung his freed arms, slashing his greatsword at Shurfeng, who stood over 50 yards away. As Urdia swung his greatsword, a torrent of fire swept toward Shurfeng. Shurfeng spun, meeting the attack with his swords as the flames were about to hit him. Void Shield. Boom! The Void Shield, which had 10 times Shurfeng's maximum HP, nearly shattered as a result of the attack, and the impact threw Shurfeng backward over 30 yards. What a frightening move. Shurfeng silently celebrated when he saw that his Void Shield had only cracked. If he hadn't responded appropriately, that attack would have killed him. Urdia was far more powerful than Shurfeng had imagined. Had he allowed his strength and greed to blind him, challenging the largest grave instead, he would have died the moment his absolute domain's duration ended. Meanwhile, thanks to Urdia's attack, Shurfeng and the heroic spirit were now separated by 100 yards. Although Abyssal Bind wouldn't hold down Urdia for 5 seconds, it should be able to keep him in place for 2. Fortunately, as a Tier 3 heroic spirit, Urdia couldn't attack a target that was so far away. In the remaining 2 seconds, Shurfeng widened the gap between him and his pursuer by more than 300 yards. Urdia's movement speed was much higher than Shurfeng's, but during a chance, Urdia would need some time to get within attack range. Meanwhile, Shurfeng continued to move closer to the barrier. 150 yards. 100 yards. 50 yards. When Urdia was less than 80 yards away from Shurfeng, and was about to bombard the fleeing swordsman once more, Shurfeng finally slipped through the magic barrier. Enraged, Urdia sent another wave of fire at Shurfeng, but this time Shurfeng retrieved a summon guard scroll and called forth Anna. As Anna appeared before him, Shurfeng breathed a sigh of relief. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He might not be a match for a titled, Tier 3 heroic spirit, but that wasn't the case for Anna. Anna was an epic guard with a 113-point growth potential. She might not rival an NPC hero of the same tier, but she wasn't far from it. She'd have no problems holding off Urdia. Calmly, Anna swung her staff and cast a spell in response to Urdia's fiery attack. A black-white twofold magic array appeared before the personal guard. The moment Urdia's flames encountered the array, it looked like they had crashed into the side of a rocky mountain. No matter how much fire crashed into and burned the magic array, they didn't do any damage. Alright, let's leave. With Urdia chasing after him, even after he had crossed the inner region's magic barrier, Shurfeng immediately activated the Tier 2 group instantaneous teleportation scroll he had pulled from his bag earlier, leaving the island with Anna by his side. Chapter 23:11 Manabody Star Moon Kingdom, White River City. Once Shurfeng and Anna had arrived in the Voidlands safe zone, he used a return scroll and teleported back to White River City. However, he nearly thought he had arrived at the wrong place when he emerged from the teleportation array. Many of the players in the teleportation hall had already reached level 90, and there were quite a few level 91 players among the crowd. Not even Dragonheart Island's experts should have reached this level yet. He had only been busy with his Tier 3 promotion quest for a few days. The effects of the planar passages opening early are so drastic? The open planar passages was the only explanation Shurfeng could think of. The planar passages activation wouldn't just lead to new players on the main continent. It would also bring in an abundance of resources, including leveling resources. During Shurfeng's previous life, the planar passages activation had triggered a leveling frenzy among the main continent's players, but it had been nothing compared to this. However, after giving the matter some more thought, Shurfeng knew such a situation wasn't impossible. His presence in God's domain had already caused a significant butterfly effect, and players in this life leveled much faster than in the past. With the planar passages activating before mainstream players had even reached level 100, the increased resources would have a greater effect on players. With so many excellent grinding spots available, it was only natural that players would level up faster than before. As Shurfeng was about to leave the teleportation hall, a 100-man team of independent players walked into the building. Noticing the team's arrival, many players in the hall turned their attention to the newcomers, chatting quietly amongst themselves. Quick look. Silver Arrow. They must be heading out to raid another level 95 team dungeon. I wonder when our adventurer team will be ready to do the same. Your adventurer team? Dream on. Even the Black Dragon Empire's players are just starting to raid level 95 team dungeons. Not to mention Star Moon Kingdom's players. Moreover, Silver Arrow was one of the first adventurer teams to join the Shadowless Adventurer Alliance, and it's received a lot of help from the Shadow Empire Adventurer team. I guess you're right. But joining the Shadowless Adventurer Alliance is so difficult. I've heard that many of the well-known adventurer teams from the neighboring kingdoms have been rejected. That's right. The passing rate is incredibly low, but as long as an adventurer team becomes a member, it'll undergo a metamorphosis. Not only will its overall strength significantly increase, but not even first-rate guilds and superpowers experts would dare to mess with it. The various players discussing the Silver Arrow Adventurer team did so in envy. Most of Silver Arrow's members had already reached level 92, which not even Superpower's main force members had reached. The surrounding players were even more jealous when they saw the equipment Silver Arrow's members wore. Every member of the adventurer team had a full set of level 90 fine gold equipment. Although many expert players had climbed to level 90 or above due to the planar passages, very few had acquired level 90 weapons and equipment, much less top-tier items. With a full set of level 90 fine gold equipment, players would qualify to raid level 95 team dungeons. The Otherworld's adventurer alliances have already developed this far? Shurfeng had to admit that he was a little surprised to see Silver Arrow's members. The Otherworld's adventurer teams had only begun to form adventurer alliances after the main continent's various powers had tried to invade these otherworlds multiple times in the past. The adventurer alliances had then relied on independent players to contest for the level 100+ neutral maps on the main continent, at which point, many of the main continent's powers had begun to perish. Shurfeng had never thought the butterfly effect would be so massive that Otherworld's powers would form adventurer alliances by this stage of the game. With this, these Otherworld powers would pose a much greater threat to the main continent's powers than they had during his previous life. After the commotion Silver Arrow's team had caused, Shurfeng rushed out of the teleportation hall and made his way to the library. He had thought that he was far ahead of most players since he had reached level 100 and completed his Tier 3 promotion quest. He also had Kola and the others who had already reached level 95 and beyond. They should reach level 100 soon. However, it seemed that the butterfly effect he had caused would be disastrous for him. If he couldn't quickly become a lord of a neutral map, as the various superpowers in the past had, both he and Zero Wing would vanish into history. Half an hour later, Shurfeng arrived at the top floor of White River City's library. He found Charlene quietly reading an ancient tome from her throne at the far end of the Star Moon Hall. You really know how to surprise people. I thought you'd be stuck there for several months, Charlene said, smiling as she pulled her gaze from the book and looked at Shurfeng. Are you really prepared to inherit your legacy? You only have one opportunity. Your performance will greatly affect your future. Yes, I'm ready. Shurfeng nodded. The Tier 3 promotion quest consisted of 2 parts. Locating the lost legacy was the first part, and inheriting it was the second. The second part was also the most important of the promotion quest, in which one would change their body's mana framework. As a major turning point in God's domain, players' physiques and their body's mana framework would transform when they reached Tier 3. Of course, not all mana frameworks were equal. The difference in their strengths would even exist among players with ordinary Tier 3 classes. Players inherited a variety of legacies, and those with different mana frameworks would display varying levels of strength. However, these differences wouldn't display in a player's physique, but would affect the world's rules. For example, Tier 2 players could only survive for a short time in level 100+ neutral maps due to the area's environments, even if they just stood there and did nothing. In comparison, Tier 3 players could survive for a long time in a level 100+ neutral map, due to their body's mana framework. The stronger a player's mana framework was, the greater their survivability would be in poor environments. Their mana framework would also largely impact their stamina and concentration recovery rates. This was why Tier 3 classes had such a huge impact in God's domain. Although Shurfeng had already obtained his legacy, he wasn't out of the woods yet. His ability to inherit the legacy was far more important. Shurfeng had only completed a Tier 3 Bronze legacy in the past, and although the Bronze legacy had been among the best of its peers, and he had formed a nearly perfect mana body, it hadn't been enough to get him through his Tier 4 promotion quest. Normally, only players with a silver-ranked mana body could survive in the harsh environments that served as the venue for Tier 4 promotion quests. As a result, he had always been a step away from clearing the quest in his previous life. Of course, if he had had a piece of legendary equipment back then, the results would have been different. Even a piece of fragmented legendary equipment would have changed the outcome significantly. Unfortunately, he never managed to find one, so he hadn't been able to cross that threshold. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You alright, this is your decision, but you must remember that your time is limited. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Charlene warned. Seeing how determined Shifeng was to see the rest of his promotion quest through, she began to chant the incantation. The sword mark on the back of Shifeng's right hand began to burn, and at the same time, countless divine runes appeared across his body, gradually forming a gigantic fourfold magic array. 3 windows displaying mana body samples then appeared before him, each more complex than the last. Shifeng was ecstatic the moment he saw the magic array and sample mana bodies. The number of layers the magic array had, which would construct the mana body, represented the rank of the mana body that could be created. A single-layered magic array represented bronze rank, a 2-layered magic array represented silver rank, and so on. The mana body samples represented the complete mana bodies standard. The first sample represented the basic standard, the second represented the intermediate standard, and the third represented the advanced standard. However, the magic array that enveloped Shifeng now had 4 layers. He had never heard of a fourfold magic array creating a mana body before. Chapter 23:12 Advanced Epic. Once Charlene had formed the magic array, a series of system notification rang in Shifeng's ears. System. Congratulations on completing your Tier 3 promotion quest and obtaining the Blade Saint Legacy. Legacy completion rate 85%. Advanced Epic Legacy received. You have 4 hours to construct your mana body. System. Congratulations on being the first player to complete the Tier 3 promotion quest. You will have 1 additional hour to construct your mana body. Epic rank. Shifeng was stunned when he read the system notifications. The highest rank mana body he had heard of during his previous life had only been gold rank, and only 1 out of every 10,000 experts had earned a gold-ranked mana body during their Tier 3 promotion quests. These experts had been powerhouses in level 100+ neutral maps, strong enough to give the various superpowers massive headaches. A gold mana body provided more than high adaptability to harsh environments. It also elevated players' stamina and concentration recovery rates to extraordinary highs. Players' stamina and concentration would recover by absorbing the mana around them. Depending on the density of the mana in the area, their recovery rates would increase by 30% to 60%. With such a significant improvement to their stamina and concentration recovery rates, players would no longer have to rely on stamina equipment, replacing such items with equipment that provided more raw power. This was why players with gold mana bodies were so much stronger than ordinary experts, and could freely roam in level 100+ neutral maps. Even superpowers would find these players quite challenging to hunt down. This was also why the various superpowers' influence on independent players would significantly decrease when they reached Tier 3, even to the extent that top adventurer teams could begin to contend with superpowers. The Midnight Tea Party was a prime example of this. After level 100, players had had an absurdly difficult time trying to join the Midnight Tea Party during Shifeng's previous life. Once the adventurer team's members had reached Tier 3, a gold-ranked mana body had become a requirement for joining the team. Even superpowers had been helpless against an entire group of experts with gold mana bodies in level 100+ neutral maps. And Shifeng hadn't even heard of an epic mana body. Moreover, he now had a total of 5 hours to construct his mana body. In the past, he had only had 1 hour to construct his bronze mana body, and players with gold mana bodies had only been given 2 hours. The process of constructing a mana body was mostly the same across the board. The outcome depended on how much one could complete in the allotted time, and one's progress depended on how much time they invested in the trials. You can begin your mana body's construction now. Remember, you only have 5 hours. If you fail to complete a mana body before time runs out, The magic array will grant you the most basic mana body available, and your efforts will have gone to waste, Charlene reminded Shifeng seriously. Understood. He nodded, understanding how important this matter was. Immediately, Shifeng carefully inspected the 3 mana body samples hovering before him. Each of the mana bodies displayed was different and more complicated than the last. The simplest of the 3 was several times more complex than the Peak Bronze Legacy's mana body he had obtained in the past. Not only did these samples involve magic arrays, but they also required divine runes and refined mana manipulation. Any ordinary player might be able to copy the mana body samples blindly, but their completion rate wouldn't be high. Naturally, a low completion rate would severely affect one's combat power. A player's mana body would affect their control with their skills and spells in the future. A poorly constructed mana body would result in low mana conductibility. This would limit players' ability to use Tier 3 skills and spells with a completion rate of 90% or higher, since players had to actively guide and control their mana during the process to amplify their skills or spells' power. This was also why experts in Shifeng's previous life had preferred to aim for less complex mana bodies to ensure high completion rates, rather than aim for a more complex mana body with a low completion rate. If players constructed a perfect mana body, it wouldn't negatively affect their combat power, which would be a significant help when challenging their Tier 4 promotion quests in the future. Shifeng spent around 10 minutes inspecting the 3 mana body samples he had been given. Although the advanced mana body is extremely complex and even involves multi-line mana manipulation, I have 5 hours to play around with. I should give it a try. Having made his decision, Shifeng focused on the advanced mana body sample and began to manipulate the mana within him. There might not be a huge difference between an intermediate mana body's environmental adaptability and that of an advanced mana body, but the difference between the 2 options' recovery rates and defense was massive. Naturally, players' defense would undergo a considerable transformation when they reached Tier 3 and obtained their mana body. Their toughness as a Tier 2 player couldn't even compare. With a mana body, a layer of protective mana would envelop their frame, making them less prone to physical injury, which would reduce their combat power from ordinary attacks. Naturally, the higher the mana body's rank was, the stronger this protective layer would be. It would also help players recover from physical injuries much faster. Time flew by. After nearly 20 minutes, Shifeng had finally finished constructing his first mana body. Shifeng could feel himself grow much stronger the instant he completed his mana body. Now the surrounding mana actively flowed into him, giving him a mentally refreshed feeling. System: mana body constructed. Completion rate 64%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? I barely passed? Sure enough, the advanced mana body isn't easy to construct. Shifeng gave the completion rate a bitter smile. But to think that this mana body is so powerful despite a 64% completion rate, an epic mana body is really amazing. Normally, a mana body with a 60% completion rate was only considered passable. If one failed to achieve a passing completion rate in the designated time, they'd be stuck with the default mana body. With the default option, achieving a 90% completion rate with Tier 3 skills and spells would be practically impossible. Players typically needed a 75% completion rate mana body to ensure their skills and spells would remain unaffected. In the past, Shifeng had constructed his bronze mana body with a 95% completion rate. At that standard, a direct hit from a mysterious iron weapon had, at most, left a small scratch, hardly affecting his combat power. However, he didn't have much hope of achieving a 95% completion rate with his mana body in this life. An epic mana body was simply too complex. His only goal was to get an 80% completion rate to avoid any negative effects to his combat power. Even with an 80% completion rate with an epic mana body, only secret silver weapons and better would be capable of physically injuring him. Shifeng then started his second attempt. After the first attempt, he chose not to focus on speed. Rather, he took great care slowly constructing the mana body. After more than half an hour, Shifeng had ended up with a 72% completion rate, just short of the 75% threshold. Shifeng invested a full hour for his third attempt, but he had only earned a 74% completion rate. What am I missing? He began to grow frustrated as he examined the advanced mana body sample again. He had already spent nearly half of his allotted time, Yet he hadn't constructed an adequate advanced mana body. If he continued to waste time, he wouldn't even have enough time to attempt the intermediate mana body's construction. He had performed every step with great precision, yet he still only achieved a 74% completion rate. During his previous life, he hadn't been anywhere near the refinement realm standard, yet he had still managed a 95% completion rate with his mana body. However, even as a domain realm expert, he had only reached a 74% completion rate. It was unbelievable. No, that's not right. Shifeng suddenly snapped out of his daze. My mana manipulation hadn't been nearly as refined as it is now. I had glossed over some of the construction processes then, yet I still earned a 95% completion rate. This mana body sample is far more complex, but with my current standards it shouldn't be this hard to achieve the same results. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You is my thirst for perfection having the opposite effect. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng began another attempt. This time, instead of trying to perfect all aspects of the construction process, he focused on certain parts while glossing over the rest. This time, he completed the mana body in less than half an hour. The instant he completed his mana body, his 5 senses underwent a qualitative transformation. His affinity with the ambient mana skyrocketed. System: mana body constructed. Completion rate 91%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? Chapter 23:13 Prototype Domain I succeeded? Shifeng was momentarily stunned when he heard the system notification. He had never considered that he'd achieve a 91% completion rate. An epic mana body was many times more complex than a bronze-ranked version, and even achieving a 90% with a silver mana body was immensely difficult. There were very few players in God's domain that were capable of achieving a 90% completion rate with a gold mana body. As far as Shifeng could remember, the player with the highest completion rate gold mana body had been Alice, the Witch of the West, in the past. She had managed to secure a peak gold mana body with a 98% completion rate. Of course, Alice was extraordinarily talented, which was why she had obtained such a high completion rate. Her manipulation of mana was simply godlike. Not even veteran domain realm experts could match her. Thanks to her powerful mana body, she had remained at the peak of God's domain even after becoming a Tier 6 mage god. The higher a mana body's completion rate, the more frighteningly powerful the mana body would be, especially for high-ranked mana bodies. Mana bodies might not provide any bonus basic attributes, but they offered significant increases to stamina and concentration recovery, defense, and self-healing capabilities. A gold mana body with a 98% completion rate could even reinforce players' control over their mana, allowing them to exhibit greater power with their skills and spells. Because of this, Alice had undergone a qualitative transformation after reaching Tier 3. Her mana manipulation had already been impressive, and after receiving the boons from her mana body, she had been able to achieve a 100% completion rate with practically all of her Tier 3 spells. Most peak experts had only been able to maintain a 90% completion rate with their Tier 3 spells after arduous training, yet Alice managed to level out at 100% in a very short time. After reaching a 90% completion rate with a Tier 3 spell, every additional percentage would significantly increase the spell's power. At 100% completion rate, a player's Tier 3 spell could even contend with the spell's Tier 3 heroes used. It was easy to imagine how devastating these spells would be against players. Although Shifeng hadn't achieved a 98% completion rate, earning a 91% was beyond his expectations. I'll keep it. Snapping out of his daze, Shifeng promptly chose to keep his current mana body. There was no save option when constructing a mana body. If players gave up on a construction attempt, they'd have to start over. Hence, players had to have a clear goal in mind when constructing their mana body. Once they'd reached that goal, it would be wise to accept the mana body and avoid any further attempts. If one continued to seek a better outcome, they'd eventually run out of time and lose everything. Shifeng had seen many players make that mistake in his previous life. The endless pursuit of perfection was the reason that many expert players had been forced to delete their accounts and begin again. While players could set up a stronger foundation by starting a new account, they'd also lose out on many opportunities. Others would have already explored the low-level maps, leaving little for new players. When starting a new account, players weren't guaranteed to become as powerful as they had been with their old one. While part of the reason that Shurfeng had achieved a 91% completion rate was his discovery of the correct thought process, luck was a larger part. He wasn't confident of repeating these results, and if he tried and earned an 89% completion rate, he'd just cry. There was a huge difference between a mana body with an 89% completion rate and one with a 90%. Mana bodies with a 75% completion rate or above wouldn't negatively affect players, and those with an 85% to 89% completion rate would receive a significant boost to their defense and stamina and concentration recovery. Mana bodies with a 90% to 94% completion rate, however, were considered top grade, and all of the aforementioned bonuses would be maxed out. If he had a high probability of achieving a 95% completion rate or above, another attempt might be worth the risk. A 93% or 94% completion rate wouldn't make much of a difference after all. However, he'd be ruined if he earned a completion rate below 90%. After Shurfeng accepted the mana body, the magic array around him flashed with a blinding light, and a horrific amount of mana gathered rapidly before flowing into him. As the torrent of mana filled him, Shurfeng felt like his body had been set on fire. The burning sensation was far more intense than it had been with his peak bronze mana body. But as his advanced epic mana body began to take shape, Shurfeng's perception of the world around him grew sharper. After 6 seconds, magic circuits began to surface across Shurfeng's body, and the ambient mana steadily gathered within him. Although the magic circuits faded away 2 seconds later, the mana didn't stop flowing into him. System. Congratulations! You have become a Tier 3 Blade Saint and obtained an advanced epic mana body. All basic attributes plus 400, all resistance plus 80, attack power and attack speed increased by 30%, all basic attributes increased by 60%, and physique increased by 70%. Rewarding 80 legacy skill points. Finally, I got my body back. Shurfeng was ecstatic as he felt the new changes. Tier 3. He had spent nearly a decade as a Tier 3 player during his previous life, so he was most familiar with this tier. Now that he had recovered to his peak, he could finally exhibit his true combat power. While Shurfeng basked in the familiar strength, he noticed that his perception had become drastically sharper than before. He could even sense the flow of mana in the air. A prototype domain. The sensation astonished Shurfeng. Is this an advanced epic mana body's ability? Previously, he'd only been able to perceive such details within a 30-yard radius around him by relying on his 5 senses. Now, however, his perception had extended to 50 yards away. Moreover, he felt like an absolute overlord within the 50-yard radius. Of course, he didn't actually have control over this area. He only had rudimentary control of the ambient mana. Even so, this was a prototype domain. A domain operated on the principle of controlling the mana in a specific area to create a miniature world that favored the player. Although he couldn't suppress his enemies with a prototype domain, he could manipulate the ambient mana and reduce the mana density where his enemies stood. The decreased density wouldn't affect players' basic attributes, but it would impact their concentration in battle. Such an ability would definitely grant him an edge in combat. Moreover, he could sense that his stamina and concentration recovery rates had improved by at least 70% due to his new mana body. He had also become tough enough that not even full-powered attacks from a secret silver weapon could easily injure him. In other words, if a player wielding a secret silver weapon struck the unprotected parts of his body, their damage would be reduced to the lowest possible value, as if they had struck a piece of armor. Now that he had obtained his mana body, Shurfeng opened his legacy skill menu to check for new skills. There were over 20 Tier 3 skills available, and every one of them required at least 20 legacy skill points to learn. Some of the more powerful skills even required 50 points. Players that had failed to collect legacy skill points from unconventional means would be fortunate to learn 2 Tier 3 skills upon reaching Tier 3. Fortunately, that wasn't the case for Shurfeng. With the points he had saved up thus far and the points he just obtained, he had nearly 100 legacy skill points to spend. Shurfeng immediately spent 40 legacy skill points to upgrade Blade Liberation and Blade Awakening to Tier 3. He then spent another 50 points to learn Void Slash, the strongest skill a Tier 3 Blade Saint could learn. Void Slash. Action type. Requires Sword Tier 3, proficiency needed to upgrade to Tier 4, 0/100,000. Manipulate the power of the void to execute 6 slashes. Each slash carries 150% of user's strength and causes 200% divine damage. User may transfer to the location of any of the 6 slashes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. U cooldown. 8 seconds. Not only did Tier 3 skills possess greater raw power than Tier 2 skills, but they were also more capable of injuring high-tiered monsters. However, Tier 3 skills had very long cooldowns. Those with immense power and short cooldowns like Void Slash were exceptionally rare. Normally, players tried to learn several Tier 3 skills and link them together to make up for the long cooldowns. However, with Void Slash alone, Shurfeng could exhibit nearly the full potential DPS of a Tier 3 player. Now that I've reached Tier 3, it's time I lead everyone to a level 100 neutral map. With his new strength, Shurfeng was confident that he could eliminate a level 100 Great Lord, even without Anna and Kite's help. Chapter 23:14 Tier 3 Powerhouse. When Shurfeng left the library, he made his way toward the Adventurers Association. Although he was now officially a Tier 3 player, he still needed to register his achievement at the Adventurers Association to gain the appropriate certification. Gaining Tier 3 certification at the Adventurers Association was very important. Not only would it allow players to accept high-ranked quests appropriate for their tier, but they would also be acknowledged as true powerhouses in God's domain. They would then qualify to raid the monarch bosses in neutral maps and become the area's ruler. This was also why the various powers had been so desperate to get their members to Tier 3 in the past. The Tier 3 turning point didn't simply differentiate experts from each other. It also determined whether or not one qualified to become a true overlord. After all, the various powers' true battlefield for hegemony in God's domain was in level 100 plus neutral maps. Initially, Shurfeng had planned to establish a guild town in a level 100 neutral map and steadily progressing towards lordship, but now that the planar passages had opened, and adventurer alliances had formed sooner than he had expected, he needed a more efficient plan. The planar passages activation hadn't just accelerated independent players' leveling speed. It had done so for the various powers as well. Now, he didn't have as much time to conquer level 100 plus neutral maps. Zero Wing wasn't like the various superpowers. It lacked the manpower and resources to secure a foundation in level 100 neutral maps as quickly as superpowers could. Moreover, Zero Wing wouldn't be able to secure as much territory as the various superpowers. To establish a guild town in a level 100 neutral map, the ruling power would need to station a large number of players in the map long-term. Level 100 neutral maps were very far away from kingdoms and empires, considered free zones that were outside of any kingdom or empire's protection. In addition, NPCs weren't particularly interested in visiting these guild towns due to the neutral map's harsh environments. As a result, very few NPCs would apply as soldiers, and those that did would ask for exorbitant salaries. Hence, unlike in guild towns within kingdoms, empires, and low-level neutral maps, players had to handle the majority of their guild town's defenses in level 100 neutral maps. This was also why guilds that wanted to secure a foothold in level 100 plus neutral maps needed to upgrade their towns into guild cities as quickly as possible. They'd only be able to solidify their rule over the map with a guild city. After all, not only would guilds have to face monster assaults, but they'd also have to deal with enemy powers. Establishing rule in a level 100 plus neutral map was already an intense challenge for guilds, and it would be especially difficult for Zero Wing, which lacks certain foundational aspects. The only solution Shurfeng could think of was to become a lord. As a lord, players would have full authority over the territory they controlled, and they'd be able to recruit various neutral race NPCs. A lord could also establish their own knight division. The NPCs players could recruit for a knight division were different from the NPC soldiers one could hire to protect a guild town. They were more akin to personal guards, and players could recruit these knights from various kingdoms and empires, nurturing them as they did personal guards. Once a player became a lord of a land, they could recruit up to 5,000 knights. Although that didn't seem like a lot, these knights were bona fide NPCs and would be immensely helpful when defending a guild's territories. While Shurfeng traveled toward the Adventurers Association, he called Blackie. Blackie, How are things coming along in the Northern Fortress? Shurfeng asked. He had spent quite a lot of time completing his promotion quest. Although he had told Blackie and the others not to contact him unless something important happened, and he hadn't received any calls, he refused to believe that Dragonheart Island's various superpowers were content to sit by and watch while Zero Wing earned a ton of profits from its newfound gold mine. The fortress's player population has already reached 1,500,000, and we're earning roughly 14,000 ancient gold per day. Dragonheart Island's various powers are practically dying with envy, especially War Blood. Because of the Northern Fortress's benefits, almost no one is visiting Warblood's Rock Nest Fortress. Blood Oath is likely losing his mind right now, Blackie said, chuckling. Also, as per your instructions, I purchased a plot of land near the World Tower a few days ago, and I bought a guild residence in Dragonheart City's inner area, so our guild has a temporary resting point in the city. Hearing how much Blackie had purchased over the last few days, Shurfeng sighed ruefully. He had considered several thousand ancient gold an astronomical sum in his past life. Yet now, he earned 14,000 ancient gold each day from the Northern Fortress alone. It was no wonder why the various superpowers had fought so hard to capture the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses in the past. However, Dragonheart Island's powers have been developing rapidly due to the planar passage's opening. Quite a few superpowers now have their own small fortresses, and based on the reports I've received, Warblood, Starlink, and 13 Thrones are marching toward the Southern Tower Medium Fortress, Blackie said worriedly. If they're successful, we'll likely see a significant decrease to the Northern Fortress's income. It certainly won't benefit our development in Dragonheart City. Why don't we capture a few more fortresses, Guild Leader? Zero Wing now had quite a bit of manpower in the Gravity Mountain Range. With Phoenix Rain's subordinates protecting the Northern Fortress, they had enough strength to capture the other fortresses. The Gravity Mountain Range only had so many fortresses. If they captured a few more, they should be able to maintain 70% to 80% of their profits, even if the Northern Fortress's income decreased. Let the other powers fight for the fortresses. We only need the Northern Fortress, Shurfeng said, chuckling. Also, notify all of the main force members to gather in White River City. We'll be heading to a level 100 neutral map. That's where we really need to be right now. The Gravity Mountain Range was an excellent place for players to grind for levels and resources right now, but it couldn't help players rise to prominence. A level 100 neutral map? Blackie's eyes glowed when he heard Shurfeng's plan. Alright, I'll notify them right away. The Gravity Mountain Range had bountiful resources, but it paled in comparison to unexplored level 100 neutral maps. Moreover, Zero Wing's main force members would benefit more from grinding in level 100 neutral maps at their levels than they would from grinding in the Gravity Mountain Range. After disconnecting the call, Blackie began to gather Zero Wing's main force members and head toward White River City. Meanwhile, Shurfeng arrived at the Adventurers Association. The Adventurers Association was quite lively at the moment, with just as many visiting players as the city's auction house. The auction house wasn't the only construction that transformed after White River City's promotion. The Adventurers Association had similarly undergone a metamorphosis, and now contained a lot more NPCs who visited to consign quests. Some of these quests included those in high-level neutral maps and escort quests to the kingdom's borders. If one were lucky, they might even find crusade quests to slay monsters in neutral maps. With the opportunity to earn both equipment and money available, the Adventurers Association had become a hub for many independent players. As Shurfeng entered the first floor hall, he was greeted by the sight of a ton of level 90-plus players. Now, not even the Adventurers Associations in Imperial capitals could compare to the prosperity the association in White River City enjoyed. Pushing his way through the crowd, Shurfeng quickly made his way to the second-floor hall and applied for his certification as a Tier 3 adventurer. After completing the process in a VIP reception room, the Adventurers Association officially recognized Shurfeng as a Tier 3 powerhouse. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lord Bronze Legatee, is there anything else I can help you with today? The elven woman who had received him asked, smiling. I wish to see the Monarch Crusade quests for Cold Spring Forest, Shurfeng declared. Cold Spring Forest was the closest level 100 neutral map to Star Moon Kingdom, and it was one of the few level 100 maps with a relatively comfortable environment. Many Tier 2 players had grinded in the Cold Spring Forest after reaching level 100 in the past, including Shurfeng himself. However, the various superpowers had taken control of the map's 6 regions by the time he had reached Tier 3. Now that he was the first Tier 3 player in the game, he couldn't miss this opportunity. Chapter 23:15 Ice Dragon Heathwaite. After Shurfeng made his request, the Elven administrator made a quick trip to the Adventurers Association's reference room and returned with 7 parchment scrolls. Lord Bronze Legatee, here are the crusade quests you've requested. Here is the information on all 7 of Cold Spring Forest's monarchs, the Elven administrator said as she placed the scrolls on the table. 7 monarchs? Shurfeng was a little surprised when he saw the 7 ancient scrolls. In God's domain, only one monarch would manage a region, and as far as he knew, Cold Spring Forest only consisted of 6 regions. This meant that there should only be 6 monarchs. He had never heard of a 7th. My lord, I have to remind you that you may only accept one crusade quest. Whether or you succeed or fail, you may only accept another crusade quest after 10 days. The materials needed to create the transfer stones are quite expensive as well. Please choose wisely, the Elven administrator explained. Shurfeng had already known all of that, and nodding silently, he began to inspect the scrolls. He wanted to know if the information he had obtained during his previous life had changed. If Cold Spring Forest's monarchs had massively changed due to his reincarnation, his plans would come to an abrupt end. A monarch was no ordinary field boss. They might not be as powerful as level 100+ world bosses, but they were considered superior mythic monsters. They could kill Tier 3 players as effortlessly as squishing ants. Trying to raid such a boss with a Tier 3100-man team the same level would be futile. Players needed to rely on special means to raid a monarch. After browsing through the information for 10 or so minutes, Shurfeng breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness everything's the same as I remembered. The only difference is the extra monarch. But even as he sighed, his gaze was glued on the extra monarch's information. The 7th monarch was part of the legendary dragon race, the Ice Dragon Heathwaite. Meanwhile, the region Heathwaite ruled over was the Cold Spring Canyon, which was located in the Cold Spring Forest Central region. Cold Spring Canyon had been quite famous in the past in God's domain due to the extremely rare Arctic water it produced. Arctic water was one of the few items in God's domain that could improve a player's adaptability to their environment. The effects might not be astounding, and the item was useless to players with gold mana bodies or better, but it would be tremendously helpful to Tier 2 players when they challenged their Tier 3 promotion quests. This was why so many powers had fought for control of the Cold Spring Canyon during Shurfeng's previous life. Shurfeng had never dreamed that someone could actually rule over the Cold Spring Canyon. Without any more hesitation, Shurfeng accepted the crusade quest to hunt the Ice Dragon, Heathwaite. Are you sure you wish to accept this quest, Lord Bronze Legatee? We only have one transfer stone connected to the Ice Dragon's lair left. If you fail this quest, you will not be able to accept it again in the future, the Elven administrator warned when Shurfeng selected the crusade quest that had remained untouched for over a century. I'll take it, Shurfeng said with determination. He'd have a high chance of success with hunting the other monarchs thanks to his memories, but the Cold Spring Canyon was simply too valuable to give up. Technically, he could hunt one of the other 6 monarchs first and raid the Ice Dragon after the 10-day wait, but covering one area would be quite taxing on the guild with Zero Wing's current standards. Zero Wing simply couldn't manage 2 areas. Since he was limited to a single area, he had to choose the best option available. Even if he failed, he could prevent another power from obtaining the Cold Spring Canyon. The cost to teleport to Heathwaite's lair is quite high. You will have to pay 10,000 gold and 20,000 magic crystals as a deposit. If you complete the quest, we will return the deposit in full, as well as pay you your deserved remuneration. If you fail, however, your deposit will be forfeit, the Elven administrator said seriously. That's fine. Shurfeng had already prepared for this cost. He handed the Elven administrator the deposit in exchange for a gray-white crystal. This crystal was none other than the transfer stone for the Ice Dragon's lair. After obtaining the transfer stone, Shurfeng made his way to the Candlelight trading firm to retrieve some of the dark gold weapons that had been stored there. He then upgraded the Abyssal Blade to level 90, which was as high as he could upgrade the magic weapon right now. Level 95 weapons were still considered a luxury, not to mention level 95 dark gold weapons. Fortunately, the Abyssal Blade's attack power and attributes were only slightly lower than those of a level 100 epic weapon. Despite the fact that it was only a level 90 magic weapon, the Abyssal Blade would be more than enough for Shifeng's needs. Shifeng then visited the Candlelight trading firm's second basement floor, which was where he stored his most important items. A guild residence was quite secure, but the Candlelight trading firm in White River City was many times safer than Zero Wings Guild Hall. At this point, only Tier 4 players would have any hope of breaking past the shop's defenses. At this moment, an NPC guard stood before the warehouse on the second basement floor. He was a level 100 Tier 3 Fine Gold guard, and unless one had permission, not even a Tier 3 Apex expert would get past him. The Candlelight trading firm's defenses were impressively strict. With the help of the Grandmaster Forger Celiora, Shifeng had previously recast the disintegration armor, a piece of legendary equipment, yet despite being unfinished, it was too powerful for Shifeng to use. Moreover, carrying the disintegration armor on him wasn't safe, so he had stored it in the Candlelight trading firm's underground warehouse. First, he didn't want to risk losing it, even if the chance of it dropping upon his death was negligible. Second, even after recasting it, the disintegration armor's aura would still attract ores, especially powerful, high-tiered ores. If he had attracted a powerful ore's attention as a Tier 2 player, he would have been helpless. Furthermore, he couldn't equip it yet. He had coveted legendary items for a long time. He had heard countless stories of players who owned a legendary item in his previous life. There were tales of Tier 4 players defeating Tier 5 players and Tier 5 players slaying Tier 6 God rank players. One player had even soloed a Tier 5 dragon. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yet, the piece of legendary equipment he had gone to great lengths to obtain was an unfinished product, and its minimum use requirement was Tier 3. To make matters worse, he hadn't even been able to inspect its attribute panel until he had reached Tier 3. Holding on to the disintegration armor would have only frustrated him. Now that he had finally reached Tier 3 and met the minimum requirements to equip the disintegration armor, it was time to retrieve it. With a piece of legendary equipment, defeating the ice dragon Heathwaite would be far easier. Legendary items could, after all, allow players to transcend tiers, and as a Tier 3 player, he should be able to contend with the Tier 4 ice dragon with the disintegration armor equipped. Once he entered the warehouse and arrived before the disintegration armor, Shifeng chanted an incantation to release the seal protecting it. As soon as the seal faded, crimson energy pulsed away from the pitch-black chest piece, spreading. A pressure that would even make Tier 2 experts uncomfortable began to fill the warehouse. As the disintegration armor's aura swept over him, Shifeng felt his blood begin to boil as bloodlust wormed its way into his mind. Taking several seconds to suppress the maddening feeling, Shifeng tapped on the disintegration armor to inspect its attribute panel. Chapter 23:16 Armor of Legend. Space itself faintly began to crumble as it was exposed to the disintegration armor's disintegration power. Despite having reached Tier 3, the moment Shifeng touched the armor, he could feel the mana in his right arm vibrate and felt signs of it beginning to break down. Mana dispersal. The sensation in Shifeng's right arm stunned him. He hadn't had a particularly clear idea of what the disintegration armor had done to him when he had been Tier 2. He had only felt a strong, stifling pressure from the armor. Now that he was Tier 3, however, he could sense the disintegration power blocking and destroying the mana within him. After a slight touch, the mana density in his right arm had significantly decreased. If he maintained contact with the disintegration armor for a long period, it would utterly destroy the mana that coated his body. Losing this mana coating didn't seem like a major problem, but it would deal a fatal blow to Tier 3 players and above. After reaching Tier 3, a player's mana body would drive every action they took in God's domain. If their mana body couldn't conduct mana, they'd be as good as crippled. The mana body played a crucial role when players used Tier 3 skills and spells. Without a working mana body, activating those abilities would be nearly impossible. Naturally, the difference between the combat power a Tier 3 player could display with Tier 3 skills and spells and a Tier 3 player who couldn't would be obvious at a glance. Once Shurfeng had tapped on the Disintegration Armor, its attribute panel appeared before him. Disintegration Armor, unfinished product. Chest plate, legendary rank, equipment requirement. Strength 9000, agility 7000 tier requirement. Tier 3 divine defense plus 15,000, affected by player's level. All basic attributes plus 1000, affected by player's level and tier. Physique increased by 100%, affected by player's tier. When equipped, strength increased by 120%, agility increased by 100%, and endurance increased by 100%. All resistance plus 300, magic resistance increased by 40%. Mana bodies effects increased by 50%, ignore levels plus 30, all item level requirements reduced by 10 levels. Additional passive skill Disintegration Body. Reduces the damage from Tier 3 or below attacks by 70%, reduces damage from Tier 4 or above attacks by 40%, immune to all control effects, weakens stiffening effects by 70%, and increases reaction speed by 20%. Additional active skill 1 Disintegration Field. Disintegrates all skills and spells within a 100-yard radius. Skills and spells at Tier 2 and below will be nullified, while skills and spells above Tier 2 will be weakened by 60%. All entities within range will suffer a 40% reduction to basic attributes, physique and stamina, in addition to a 400% increase to their stamina and concentration consumption rates. No cooldown. Additional active skill 2, Disintegration Power. Gathers all of the Disintegration Armor's power and temporarily sacrifice all of its attributes to upgrade user by 1 tier for 60 seconds. Cooldown, 12 hours, cannot be stacked with skills and spells of similar effect. The Disintegration Armor is a divine armor that the Ur Empire's founding emperor had created with various divine items. This armor had been destroyed during a battle against gods. The Disintegration Armor has recovered a portion of its original strength after Celiora recast the chest piece using a blood contract. Due to the armor's disintegration power, the armor's attributes suffer an 80% reduction when equipped. If equipped by the blood contractor, the armor's attributes will only be reduced by 50%. God crystals required to repair the Disintegration Armor fully. 0/10. Amazing! Shurfeng's eyes glowed as he read the Disintegration Armor's attribute panel. Before this, he hadn't had a clear idea of what a true legendary item's attributes would look like. He had only heard of legendary items during his previous life. He hadn't actually seen a real legendary item's attribute panel since anyone with such an item had rightfully kept a tight lid on its abilities. Although the Disintegration Armor was an unfinished product, it was the strongest piece of equipment he had ever laid eyes on. Even Gentle Snow's fragmented legendary ranked 7 Luminaries battle armor was far weaker than this chest piece. The 7 Luminaries battle armor had originally been a legendary item, but after taking significant damage, its rank had fallen. And yet, despite being a damaged piece of armor as well, the Disintegration Armor was leagues stronger than the 7 Luminaries battle armor in all aspects. The fact that the Disintegration Armor granted divine defense, rather than a simple boost to ordinary defense, was particularly astounding. This meant that even skills and spells that dealt true damage wouldn't be as effective against the Disintegration Armor's wearer. It would also reduce lower-tier players' damage, and higher-tier players wouldn't be able to deal any additional damage due to their tier advantage. Divine Defense was the highest grade of defense in God's domain. It's a pity that the armor is so badly damaged. Even if I equip it, I'll only exhibit a fraction of its true might. If I could display the Disintegration Armor's full power, dealing with the Ice Dragon would be a piece of cake, Shurfeng thought. The Disintegration Power's instability limited the armor's true strength. At the armor's peak, Shurfeng could likely defeat the Mythic-ranked Ice Dragon head-on, with the additional 100% physique and 120% strength. Even so, Shurfeng was overjoyed that he could finally equip the Disintegration Armor. A piece of legendary equipment. Countless players, including Apex experts, dreamed of equipping such an item. Legendary items were simply too rare in God's domain. Just obtaining a single clue that might lead to one required an astronomical amount of manpower and resources. In some cases, these clues would only lead to a fragment of a legendary item. Players would then have to find the remaining fragments and invest even more resources to repair it. Unless one were ridiculously lucky or had particularly powerful support, getting their hands on a legendary item would be utterly impossible. Now, Shifeng finally had a legendary item of his own, and he could even equip it now. The disintegration armor's attributes might be halved, but it was still slightly more powerful than a piece of fragmented legendary equipment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Shifeng immediately equipped the disintegration armor. The 9,000 strength and 7,000 agility were incredibly difficult requirements to meet. Even a Tier 3 player in full, top-tier equipment would have to wait until level 120 to fulfill them, but it wasn't an issue for Shifeng. Not only did he have an advanced bloodline, but he also wielded one of the 10 great saint legacies. Furthermore, he carried a magic weapon and multiple fragmented legendary items. Meeting the two requirements at level 100 was actually quite easy for him. The instant Shifeng equipped the disintegration armor, he felt power course through him. His basic attributes skyrocketed, and his perception considerably improved. Even his mind felt far clearer than before. If he fought Urdia, a titled Tier 3 heroic spirit, in his current condition, he'd have a high chance of defeating the undead. It's about time to leave. Glancing at the time, Shifeng realized it was time to meet up with Blackie and the others. He activated the Nightwalker's Cape's Nightwalker skill to conceal the disintegration armor's aura and information before heading toward White River City's teleportation hall. Chapter 23:17 Shadowless Empire White River City's teleportation hall. Once in the teleportation hall, Shifeng made his way to one of the high-class bars on the 3rd floor. Blackie and the others had been waiting for some time now. When they noticed Shifeng enter the establishment, they stood surprised. Yan Tianqing and Yi Luofei were particularly shocked as their guild leader pulled their attention away from their 10 gold bottles of 5-colored fruit wine. So this is a Tier 3 class? Blackie had already informed the group that Shifeng had left to challenge his Tier 3 promotion quest, and none of them had been particularly surprised. Shifeng had already reached level 100, so it was expected that he'd challenge his promotion quest. Although Shifeng's Nightwalker's Cape concealed his aura, it couldn't hide the fact that the ambient mana actively flowed toward him. God's Domain did have weapons and equipment that would attract mana to their user, but those items generally only increased the mana density around the player. However, despite so much mana flowing toward Shifeng, Yan Tianqing, whose senses were quite sharp, and Yi Luofei, who was a magical class player and only a step away from reaching the domain realm, recognized that the mana density around Shifeng hadn't actually increased. It felt as if the swordsman were a black hole, steadily devouring the ambient mana. Mana was the root of all in God's domain. A player's physical and mental condition, skills and spells were all closely tied to mana. As players at the peak of God's domain, Yan Tianqing and Yi Luofei had spent a considerable amount of time researching the game's mechanics, especially the relationship between mana and a player's virtual body. Players constantly absorbed mana from their environments, and as players' physiques grew stronger, they'd absorb more mana. This was why areas with thin or no mana were considered forbidden lands. As a Tier 3 player, Shifeng's mana absorption was astounding. If the mana that flowed into Tier 2 players was like a small creek, the mana flowing into Shifeng was a raging river. Everyone's here, guild leader. We can set off when you're ready, Blackie excitedly reported. Thanks to the Northern Fortress, Zero Wing's overall strength had increased considerably. Not only did the Northern Fortress provide the huge ancient gold profits, but it also gave players a place where they could rapidly grow stronger. By this point, Zero Wing had explored multiple ancient ruins in the Gravity Mountain Range's northern region, securing plenty of precious treasure. The guild's main force members had also reached level 97 and 98, and had upgraded most of their equipment with level 95 dark gold equipment. However, their combat standards had improved far faster than their levels in equipment. As many as 26 main force members had now reached the Truth Realm. Yan Tianqing and Yi Luofei had even reached the Ascension Realm. In addition, Alluring Summer, Silent Blade, Shadow Sword, Stubborn Bone, and Zhao Yueru had entered the Flowing Water Realm thanks to Unyielding Soul's legacy training slots. Seeing how much his comrades had improved, Shifeng was a little surprised. He hadn't expected them to grow so strong so quickly. Now Zero Wing's main force was likely only a little weaker than Superpower's main forces. If Fire Dance and the others could make some progress in the Tower of Four Gods, Zero Wing's main force might even be able to stand toe-to-toe with the various superpowers' main forces. Alright, let's go. Shifeng nodded as he joined the team. He led everyone to a teleportation array and traveled to the border town closest to the Cold Spring Forest. He then used the 7 Luminaries Ring's spatial gate to transport the team the rest of the way. Cold Spring Forest was a level 100 neutral map, as well as a junction to other level 100+ neutral maps. Thus it was quite far from civilization. Players would have to cross over a dozen large maps to reach the Cold Spring Forest from Star Moon Kingdom. Getting there was especially troublesome without a flying mount. Of course, Shifeng had the Thunder Eagle and the 7 Luminaries Ring. After teleporting multiple times, Shifeng and his team finally arrived before the cave that led to the Cold Spring Forest. The Cold Spring Forest was meant to help players transition from Tier 2 to Tier 3, unlike other level 100 neutral maps with harsh environments. Not only was this a comfortable area for players to grind, but it was also home to a large number of ancient races. The forest was also under an ancient seal's protection, so players would have to defeat the map's guardian boss and remove the seal before they could explore the map. Even with a flying mount, entering the map was impossible without completing those tasks. Guild leader, I see people. Minor Wind, who had long since reached both the Refinement Realm and Truth Realm, quickly discovered players' tracks as they arrived before the cave. It looks like there's a lot of them. I'm guessing these tracks are from a 200-man team. Others have already found this place? Shifeng was stunned. Although this cave wasn't as dangerous as a level 100 neutral map, the monsters within were still level 97+ lords and great lords. Quite a few Grand Lords wandered within the cave as well. Surviving here was no easy task. In addition, the cave was particularly dark, suppressing players' 5 senses to a certain degree. A 100-man team of current experts wouldn't last more than 10 minutes inside the cave. Even a superpower's main force would struggle to get through. There were simply too many monsters, especially since the cave should still be largely unexplored. Guild leader, should we head inside? Blackie asked. They were trying to maintain a level of secrecy. If they encountered other players, news of their operation would spread. Although they were only heading out to explore a level 100 neutral map, which shouldn't be much of a problem, they couldn't guarantee that other powers wouldn't try to take advantage of their operation. No need to worry. Let's just go, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Even if other powers learned that they were exploring the Cold Spring Forest, they couldn't cause any problems for Zero Wing's team. Other players weren't even guaranteed to get through the cave and into the forest, much less take advantage of the operation. Following which, with Kola, Yuumian, and Turtledove led the way into the cave. Visibility was poor in the dimly lit cave. Even Tier 2 players could only see up to 200 yards away, and dodging ranged attacks from multiple directions would be particularly challenging in the cave's narrow, maze-like structure. Fortunately, Zero Wing's main force members had trained in the Extraordinary Tower, so they coped with the cave monsters' ambushes relatively well. With an MT like Kola leading the way, the team had little issue pushing through the cave quickly. They didn't have to come to a halt to deal with the monsters. The cave had 2 floors, and after 3 hours, Shifeng and his comrades finally reached the 2nd floor. This was also where they'd find the Guardian boss. Unlike the 1st floor, the 2nd floor was an open canyon. It was so large that a large team wouldn't have to worry about needing room for their usual formations in battle. Moreover, the 2nd floor was much brighter than the 1st. However, the suppression on players' senses had increased in exchange. Less than 30 minutes after reaching the 2nd floor, Shifeng and his team heard explosions and noticed dazzling lights at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel led to a cavern which contained a town. Zero Wing's main force found a 200-man team clearing out the Demonkin soldiers and guards that guarded the town, while gradually approaching an ancient giant in the town's center. Every player on the 200-man team was level 96 or above, and they all wore a dark mark on their foreheads. They also radiated a faint black glow. Even as they fought the High Lord-ranked Demonkin soldiers one-on-one, these players had an overwhelming advantage. Not even the Great Lord-ranked Demonkin guards could halt these players' advance for more than a moment. As for the ancient giant in the town's center, it stood at over a dozen meters tall and had 6 arms. Each of the giant's hands held a pitch-black spear, and it loomed like the ancient god of destruction. Demonkin Soldier. Dark Creature. High Lord. Level 98 HP 49. 000 000/49000000. Demonkin Guard. Dark Creature. Great Lord. Level 99 HP 88. 000 000/88. 000 Purgatory Giant. Dark Giant. Mythic. Level 99 HP 460 000 000/460 000 Guild Leader. They look like Shadowless Empire's members. It's an adventurer team from the Shadow World, Blackie said, quickly discerning the players' identities once he saw them. Shadowless Empire? It's no wonder why those two are here. Shurfeng thought, spotting a familiar man and woman at the lead of the small army. Blackie's comment reminded him of exactly who those two were. Shadowless Empire had been a very famous superpower during his previous life. It had taken over the Shadow World even before the planar passages had opened. With the excellent leveling resources and special legacies the Shadow World contained, Shadowless Empire had flourished wonderfully after arriving on the main continent. Two of Shadowless Empire's members, in particular, had forced the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion into a disadvantageous position during a contest for territory in level 100+ neutral maps. Those two were the same man and woman that led Shadowless Empire's 200-man team. They were the Dark Assassin Vastlock and the Shadowless Ranger Night Reader. These two players hadn't reached the Domain Realm Empire before moving to God's Domain's main continent. Yet even Domain Realm experts had been terrified of their assassination capabilities. Once they had reached the Domain Realm, they had been akin to demon kings in the dark. Those two had been responsible for plenty of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's losses, even going as far as stealing one of the pavilion's territories. Meanwhile, shortly after Zero Wings members discovered Shadowless Empire's team, Shadowless Empire's members noticed them, as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You, Commander, those are Zero Wings members. Should we get rid of them? A level 96 Dark Berserker asked, making a throat-cutting gesture as he glanced at Zero Wing's main force. I hadn't thought Zero Wing would reach this place. It's no wonder why everyone's insisted that Starlink and the various superpowers can't seem to deal with the guild, Night Reader said, chuckling. Night Reader was a slender woman with vibrant red hair. She wore epic chainmail and wielded an ancient crimson bow as well. It's a pity that their era in God's domain has come to an end. Zero Wing is simply wasting its time by coming here. Because the Shadow World lacked top-tier weapons and equipment, Shadowless Empire's equipment standards had been lacking when they had first arrived on the main continent. However, their equipment standards had undergone a qualitative transformation rather quickly, and Shadowless Empire's members had caught up with the main continent's players. With their advantage in terms of legacies, levels, and combat standards, not even the various superpowers with vast foundations were a match for Shadowless Empire now. As for the main continent's non-superpowers, they were utterly helpless before Shadowless Empire's strength. When he heard Night Reader's comment, the bald youth leading the team, Vastlock, nodded his agreement. Ignore them and prioritize killing the Purgatory Giant. They'll know what to do once they realize the difference between our strengths, Vastlock said. He returned to commanding his team as they advanced on the Purgatory Giant. Chapter 23:18 Sword rises after Vastlock declared his decision. Shadowless Empire's 200-man team accelerated their advance toward the Purgatory Giant, completely ignoring Shurfeng and the others' existence. These people really don't care about us at all. Yin Tianxing could not help but shake his head and chuckle when he saw Shadowless Empire's members' nonchalant reaction toward Zero Wing's arrival. Normally, when players came across other players out in the fields, especially when they were raiding a boss, they would give out a reminder or warning to the approaching players. However, Shadowless Empire's members simply treated Zero Wing's team as if it were air, and did not even bother trying to make contact. The only explanation for such a reaction was that Shadowless Empire had deemed them to be no threat, and not worthy of any attention whatsoever. Guild Leader, are we really not going to make a move? Blackie asked as he looked at the distant Purgatory Giant. He did not particularly care about Shadowless Empire's treatment of them, However, since the guardian boss of this cave served as the key to the Cold Spring Forest, its loot might provide them with some help once they entered the neutral map. We're only traveling toward the Cold Spring Forest. Having someone to open up a path for us is a good thing, Shurfeng said, chuckling. He then instructed everyone to get some rest first. He had no intention of snatching the boss from Shadowless Empire at all. The Purgatory Giant was indeed a very important boss. After killing it, not only would players gain access to the Cold Spring Forest, but they would also obtain a special item called Purgatory Core. When activated, the Purgatory Core would create a natural barrier with a 200-yard radius that would help players adapt to level 100 neutral maps. The barrier's effects were similar to Arctic water, except that Arctic water was only effective for one player, while the Purgatory Core applied to a specific area. For Tier 2 teams looking to grind in level 100+ neutral maps, the Purgatory Core was a very useful item. Killing the Purgatory Giant provided no other benefits aside from these two. Meanwhile, his goal was to kill the ice dragon Heathwaite and occupy the Cold Spring Canyon. To him, the Purgatory Core held no meaning. After all, once he occupied the Cold Spring Canyon, he could obtain Arctic water much more easily. At that time, let alone a 100-man team, even strengthening a 1,000-man team wouldn't be difficult. I guess you're right. Blackie nodded, as he found Shurfeng's words reasonable. He then sat down on the ground and started recovering his stamina and concentration. The Purgatory Giant was a level 99 mythic boss. Moreover, it belonged to the giant race. Its life rating was considerably high, so raiding it would not be easy. Since Shadowless Empire was willing to raid it for them, they could use this opportunity to conserve their strength for the Cold Spring Forest. While Zero Wings members rested in a distant location, Shadowless Empire's members, who were only 500 yards away from the Purgatory Giant now, also noticed what Zero Wings members were doing. It seems these people are quite smart. Had they dared try to snatch the boss, I'd make sure they got a good beating, a level 96 Dark Berserker said, smirking when he saw Zero Wings members sitting down and resting. I doubt that's the case. I bet they want to use us to test the Purgatory Giant's prowess, so that they can have an easier time raiding it afterward, Night Reader said as she glanced at Shurfeng and the others, a bright smile blooming on her face. It's a pity that they're looking down on us too much. Shadowless Empire was the ruler of the entire Shadow world. Its capabilities were far beyond anything the main continent's various superpowers could imagine. Although the Shadow world was only the size of a kingdom, as one of the higher standard otherworlds, it possessed resources that many superpowers coveted. However, despite the superpowers' numerous attempts to seize the Shadow world, Shadowless Empire always emerged victorious. Alright, focus. The boss has already sensed us. Everyone get ready. Vastlock suddenly shouted when he saw the Purgatory Giant opening its eyes. The Purgatory Giant's awakening immediately panicked the wandering Demonkin soldiers and Demonkin guards. The moment the Purgatory Giant opened its eyes, everyone present felt a horrific aura wash over them. Even Zero Wings members, who sat several thousand yards away. Based on its aura, the Purgatory Giant was definitely much stronger than ordinary mythic monsters. Moreover, space within a 500-yard radius of the Purgatory Giant started changing upon the Guardian Boss's awakening, the gravel on the ground shattering. After awakening, the Purgatory Giant immediately advanced toward Shadowless Empire's members and thrust its 6 spears at them, the spears tearing apart the space they passed through. Just as the 6 spears were about to reach Shadowless Empire's members, 6 shield-bearing Dark Knights jumped forward and met the spears in battle, the bodies of these Dark Knights radiating a bright, black light while the dark mark on their foreheads glowed a faint crimson. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions echoed throughout the entire tattered town. After receiving the Purgatory Giant's spear, each of the 6 Dark Knights stumbled only 3 or 4 steps back before stabilizing their bodies. They also lost only 25% or so of their HP, which was quickly regenerated thanks to the rear-line healers. When the Purgatory Giant started launching its second round of attacks, the 6 Dark Knights had yet to recover their balance. At this time, however, 6 more Dark Knights emerged from Shadowless Empire's to block the Purgatory Giant's spears. Like so, the two parties of MTs took turns receiving the Purgatory Giant's attacks, their coordination perfect. Due to their perfect execution and timing, The 12 MTs prevented the Purgatory Giant from inflicting any harm on the rest of the team. "Start!" Vastlock shouted. Upon hearing Vastlock's command, the Cursemancers at the rear line immediately cast Dark Devour. In the next moment, a black puddle formed beneath the Purgatory Giant's feet, the black liquid continuously crawling up the giant and threatening to consume it. Although the spell did not deal any damage, it applied a significant speed debuff. This situation instantly reduced the pressure on the team. Immediately after, Shadowless Empire's members started bombarding the boss in a frenzy. Taking the lead to attack, Night Reader drew her Crimson Bow and sent a crimson light pillar shooting at the Purgatory Giant. Minus 331,564. With just one attack, Night Reader halted the movement of one of the Purgatory Giant's arms. At this time, Vastlock had also made his way to the Purgatory Giant's back and stabbed his two pitch-black, glowing daggers at the Mythic boss. The instant the two daggers touched the Purgatory Giant's skin, two black beams pierced through the boss, each beam causing over minus 200,000 damage. The basic attributes of these people are high. Every one of them is like a great lord. This is especially true for that assassin and ranger. Those two are most likely superior to great lords of the same level in terms of basic attributes. Moreover, these people can perfectly combine their combat techniques with their skills and spells. It's no wonder they're so confident in taking down the Purgatory Giant. Yin Tianqing praised as he watched Shadowless Empire's members fight. At this stage of the game, the majority of the main continent's experts were still experimenting with combining combat techniques with skills and spells. However, Shadowless Empire's members had already accomplished this feat, allowing their Tier 2 skills and spells to undergo a qualitative improvement. Just 30 minutes later, the Purgatory Giant finally went berserk. Shadowless Empire's members started activating their berserk skills, one after another, in response. When Vastlock and Night Reader activated their berserk skills, without even activating twofold berserk, their basic attributes already reached the standard of mythic monsters. As a result, they managed to endure the Purgatory Giant's berserk phase and eventually slew the mythic boss. Along with the Purgatory Giant's death, the magic barrier that protected the Cold Spring Forest started crumbling. The seal on the cave leading to the Cold Spring Forest was also removed. Meanwhile, beyond the cave, one could now see a snow-covered forest. After killing the Purgatory Giant, Shadowless Empire's members did not rest for long. As soon as they finished collecting the boss's loot, they made their way into the Cold Spring Forest. As they left, they glanced at the distant Zero Wing members with gleeful expressions. "Ha ha ha! Zero Wing's members must be dumbfounded after seeing us defeat the Purgatory Giant." The Dark Berserker carrying a two-handed axe laughed. "Although we got to show them the gap in strength between us, they now get to enter the Cold Spring Forest without putting in any effort," Night Reader grumbled. "There's nothing wrong with letting them gain some advantage. Zero Wing is Starmoon Kingdom's #1 guild. Its influence also reaches multiple kingdoms and empires. If we want to establish a foothold in the main continent quickly, we can make use of Zero Wing's strength," Vastlock said. After Vastlock's words, Shadowless Empire's members no longer said anything. Instead, they simply focused on traveling to the Cold Spring Forest's inner area. Roughly 5 minutes after Shadowless Empire's members entered the forest, a deafening roar suddenly echoed throughout the forest. How is this possible? A grim look surfaced on Night Reader's face when a group of fully armed dragonkin suddenly emerged from the snowy forest ahead. However, what shocked her the most were the numbers and strength of these dragonkin. Dragonkin Fighter. Dragonkin Lord. Level 100 HP 630000/630000000. Dragonkin Captain. Dragonkin High Lord. Level 101 HP 135 00000/135 Dragonkin Warrior. Dragonkin Great Lord. Level 101 HP 220,000/220,000,000. The inferior dragons standing before their team numbered more than 1,000, and even the weakest dragonkin fighter had an aura that was no weaker than that of the Great Lord ranked demonkin guards they faced before. As for the Great Lord ranked dragonkin warriors, their auras were just slightly weaker than that of the Purgatory Giant. Moreover, there were 3 of them. Defensive formations. Vastlock shouted. By the time Vastlock gave his command, however, the Dragonkin army was already charging at them. Although Shadowless Empire's members could barely hold their ground against the Lord-ranked Dragonkin fighters, they were at a severe disadvantage against the Dragonkin captains, inferior in terms of both basic attributes and reaction speed. When one of the Dark Knights failed to defend himself in time and got hit by the saber of a Dragonkin captain, he instantly lost over 1/4 of his HP. As for the Dragonkin warriors, Vastlock and Nightreader had to coordinate with each other just to pin down one. Stopping the remaining 2 great lords was beyond them. Retreat! Retreat to the cave! Vastlock shouted when he saw the 2 unfettered Dragonkin warriors slaughtering his teammates. Retreating was now their only option. Otherwise, a team wipe was inevitable. As Shadowless Empire's members continuously fell back, they eventually came across Zero Wings members, who had also entered the Cold Spring Forest. You guys hurry up and retreat. These Dragonkin are much stronger than the lords and great lords in that cave. You'll die if you go up against them. Vastlock warned as he looked at Shurfong. However, as soon as the Dark Assassin gave this advice, one of the Dragonkin warriors slaughtering Shadowless Empire's members shifted its gaze toward Zero Wings' team, which was less than 100 yards away from it. Squinting its eyes, it immediately charged toward Zero Wing. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. They're doomed. Nightreader could not help but look at Zero Wings members in pity at this sudden turn of events. The Dragonkin warriors possess very high reaction speeds and intellect. These great lords posed an enormous threat even to Shadowless Empire's members, not to mention Zero Wings members. However, just as the Dragonkin warrior arrived before Zero Wings' team and was swinging down its saber, a sword light suddenly struck at it. Suddenly, the Dragonkin warrior let out a wheeze as its 4-meter-tall body shot backward like a bullet and crashed heavily into a nearby tree, the massive tree shuddering at the impact. Chapter 23:19 Tier 3? As if time had stopped, silence fell over the entire Cold Spring Forest. Whether it was the Dragonkin or Shadowless Empire's members, they were all in a daze as they looked at the Dragonkin warrior that had collapsed before the large tree. At this moment, not only was the Dragonkin warrior in a heavily injured state, but its silver armor even sported a large cut. If one looked closely, one could even see the white, broken bones of the Dragonkin warrior beyond this cut. If not for God's domain setting that made it so that creatures would die only if their HP fell to 0, the slash from before would undoubtedly have taken the Dragonkin warrior's life. Even so, the attack still took away a large chunk of the Dragonkin warrior's HP. What did he do? Nightreader could not help her shock as she stared at Shurfong, the person who executed the attack on the Dragonkin warrior. Previously, when she used her trump card to attack the Dragonkin warrior, she had only managed to make it stumble back 1 step. Shurfong, on the other hand, heavily injured the Dragonkin warrior with just 1 stroke of his sword. For a moment, she wondered if the main god system was playing a joke on her. After all, she was currently level 97. She was also equipped in 4 pieces of epic equipment and a top-tier epic weapon. In addition, she had a special legacy that increased her basic attributes and physique by a significant margin when fighting in darkness. Even the apex experts of super guilds were most likely no match for her when it came to basic attributes. Now, however, Shurfong, who looked very ordinary and gave off no aura whatsoever, actually surpassed her strength by several degrees. No matter how she looked at this situation, she simply could not bring herself to accept it. He is probably Zero Wings guild leader Black Flame. According to rumors, he has already reached level 100. Vastlock guessed as he looked at Shurfong, his evaluation of Zero Wing increasing by a grade. Even if he is level 100, there is no way he can have enough strength to send the Dragonkin warrior flying. We can't, even if we activated our berserk skills, Nightreader said. Although the Dragonkin warrior was only a great lord, its strength was just slightly inferior to the mythic-ranked purgatory giants. Even if they activated a berserk skill, they would, at most, just match the Dragonkin warrior. In order to send it flying over 20 yards, they would need strength at the standard of mythic monsters at the very least. Of course, it's impossible just by reaching level 100. However, I suspect that he has already completed his Tier 3 promotion quest, Vastlock said in a definite tone. Tier 3? How is that possible? Night Reader simply could not bring herself to believe Vastlock's speculation. Previously, she already considered the rumor of Shurfeng reaching level 100 a wild exaggeration. The Shadow World had much more abundant leveling resources compared to the main continent. Yet even they, the top players of Shadowless Empire, had only managed to reach level 97. Now, however, Vastlock was telling her that Shurfeng had not only reached level 100, but also completed his Tier 3 promotion quest. This was unbelievable. The difficulty of promotion quests increased with each subsequent tier. The difficulty of the Tier 3 promotion quest was especially high. To complete the Tier 3 promotion quest, players would not only have to be of a sufficiently high level, but also needed to invest a lot of time into making preparations. For Night Reader herself, even if she had made all the preparations she could, she still wouldn't be confident of completing her Tier 3 promotion quest. After all, experts of their caliber couldn't settle for a mediocre result in their Tier 3 promotion quest. Needless to say, someone like Shurfeng wouldn't settle for this either. While Night Reader and Vastlock were talking about Shurfeng, the heavily injured Dragonkin warrior suddenly stood up and let loose a deafening roar, which echoed throughout the forest. Moreover, the Dragonkin warrior did not stop at just one roar. Instead, it repeatedly roared again and again. Did it get hit too hard in the head? Night Reader found the Dragonkin warrior's incessant roaring strange. Moreover, the injured Dragonkin warrior wasn't the only one acting strangely. Every other Dragonkin in the army also started roaring. No! Vastlock's complexion darkened as realization struck him. They're calling for reinforcements. As soon as Vastlock finished speaking, a deafening roar came from the depths of the forest. Following which, a commotion broke out in the distant forest, and very quickly, a huge swarm of Dragonkin charged out of there. The newly arrived Dragonkin numbered more than 3,000, including as many as 5 Dragonkin warriors. "Run!" Vastlock shouted, his scalp turning numb at this sight. At Vastlock's order, Shadowless Empire's members immediately dropped what they were doing and fled for the cave they had come from, without hesitation. However, despite seeing Shadowless Empire's members retreating, Shurfeng and the others still maintained their positions. "Why aren't you guys running yet?" Night Reader asked as she looked at Shurfeng. "We'll block them, so you guys should use this opportunity to retreat. It is still too soon for you all to come here," Shurfeng said before walking toward the Dragonkin army, together with Zero Wings members. Since Vastlock had warned him before out of Gudv Karatalul, Shurfeng naturally didn't mind helping Shadowless Empire now. "You're crazy. Do whatever you want." Night Reader huffed when she saw Zero Wing advancing toward the Dragonkin army. She then turned her head away and left. Shurfeng might have reached Tier 3, but he was only one person. He wouldn't be able to keep the several thousand Dragonkin at bay all by himself. Not to mention, 5 more Dragonkin warriors had joined the fight now. Even if the swordsman could suppress these great lords, could he suppress all 8 of them? However, before Night Reader had gone 100 yards away from her previous position, she saw Zero Wing's team clashing with the Dragonkin army. When the two sides came into contact, Shurfeng initiated the battle by executing Void Slash, using the 6 slashes his skill generated to send 6 Dragonkin warriors flying back and crashing into the Dragonkin behind them. As for the 2 remaining Dragonkin warriors, Kola stopped one of them while Turtledove stopped the other. Kola's strength might not be comparable to the Dragonkin warriors, but with the fragmented legendary rank Titan Guard and his Dragonslayer legacy, he neutralized all of the Dragonkin warriors' attacks without fail. As for Turtledove, although she was inferior to Kola in terms of both defense and strength, she had Yin Tianqing assisting her from the side. Yin Tianqing influenced the Dragonkin warriors' attacks, such that they all landed on Turtledove's shield and nowhere else. After seeing that all 8 Dragonkin warriors were stopped, Alluring Summer, Iluafei, Zhao Yueru, and the other magical class players started bombarding the approaching Dragonkin captains and Dragonkin fighters. Like a mobile turret, Zhao Yueru sent even the High Lord ranked Dragonkin captains flying with her spells. With just one AoE spell, she created a large clearing amid the Dragonkin army. Even the Dragonkin warriors stumbled when struck by her attacks. Despite the severe numerical disadvantage, Zero Wing's 100-man team coped with the Dragonkin army without suffering any casualties and relentlessly pressed deeper into the Cold Spring Forest, suppressing the Dragonkin army thoroughly. Dragon King fighters and Dragonkin captains died quickly, one after another, under Zero Wing's bombardment. Crap! Are they even human? An axe-carrying dark berserker, who had already arrived back at the cave, cursed aloud when he saw the Dragonkin army getting repulsed. He had had a tough time dealing with just one Dragonkin captain, yet Zero Wing's members were toying with the High Lords as if they were children. Zhao Yueru, Alluring Summer, and Yi Luofei in particular, had devastated the several dozen Dragonkin captains with their attacks, preventing the High Lords from reaching Zero Wing's rear line. Shifeng was even more frightening, single-handedly suppressing 6 Dragonkin warriors. Let alone damaging the swordsman. The 6 Dragonkin warriors couldn't even get within 5 yards of him. Their HPs also plummeted. After only a short moment, the 6 Dragonkin warriors had already lost 1/10 of their HPs. At this rate, the deaths of all 6 were just a matter of time. How is Zero Wing so strong? After Zero Wing's team disappeared into the snow-mantled forest, Night Reader was in a daze for a long time. When she remembered how they had thought to prove their superiority over Zero Wing, by defeating the Purgatory Giant, she felt a little embarrassed. She had never imagined that things would turn out this way. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Shifeng's performance in particular had shocked her. Every one of his actions was beyond her perception. If he had decided to contest for the Purgatory Giant back then, the consequences would have been dire. Most likely, he could annihilate their entire 200-man team all by himself. Let's return now. Zero Wing is much stronger than we initially thought. The higher-ups will need to adjust our approach to Star Moon Kingdom, Vastlock said after giving the matter some thought. Shifeng's strength was simply too frightening. He was no longer an existence Tier 2 players could hope to contend with. Moreover, the other members of Zero Wing also possessed considerable strength. With the guild definitely much stronger than ordinary major powers, Shadowless Empire would have to tread carefully in Star Moon Kingdom from now on. After saying so, Vastlock turned around and had everyone prepare to leave the Cold Spring Forest. As for Night Reader, she turned involuntarily for one last look towards the direction Shifeng disappeared. So what if you're Tier 3? Just you wait. I'll catch up with you soon. At that time, I'll show you just how powerful I am. I'll make you regret looking down on me. When Night Reader thought of the words Shifeng said to her before, she gnashed her teeth in anger and frustration, feeling as if she had been treated like a fool. Immediately afterward, she turned around and left the Cold Spring Forest. Chapter 23:20 Level 100 Exploration. Zero Wing's members gradually advanced deeper into the Cold Spring Forest. As the map had never been explored by players before, the number of Dragonkin Zero Wing's members encountered along their journey kept increasing. Fortunately, the number of Dragonkin warriors they came across did not, so the growing number of enemies did not affect the team negatively. It only provided the team with even more EXP. The EXP granted by level 100 monsters was far greater than that of level 99 monsters. Although Shifeng had brought Zero Wing's main force to grind at a level 100 Forbidden Land before, everyone's level had been very low. As they had to rely on Tier 3 demons to do most of the fighting back then, their grinding efficiency had been considerably low. Now that everyone in the team had the combat power to contend against level 100 lords, they made short work of the level 100 plus Dragonkin. As a result, everyone's experience bar increased at a very rapid rate. After grinding for just 6 hours, everyone in the team had already leveled up once. Now, even the lowest leveled player in Zero Wing's main force was level 98, whereas the guild's top experts like Yen Tianqing had reached level 99. As for Shifeng, he too had gained his final percent and reached level 101. However, in contrast to the team's leveling speed, the Dragonkin's loot rendered everyone speechless. Even the best piece of equipment dropped by the High Lord rank Dragonkin captains was level 100 Mysterious Iron rank. Moreover, this was from the first kill of these Dragonkin captains. Otherwise, the weapons and equipment they dropped would be only bronze rank. The quality of the Dragonkin captain's loot was far inferior to that of level 99 High Lords. Shifeng, however, did not find this situation surprising. After reaching level 100, ordinary experts would be able to gear themselves only in level 100 Mysterious Iron equipment. If they wished to get level 100 secret silver equipment through killing monsters, they needed the support of a sufficiently strong team. As for obtaining level 100 fine gold weapons and equipment from monster drops, that was absolutely impossible for them. Only Tier 3 experts would have the ability to grind for level 100 fine gold weapons and equipment. As for dark gold weapons and equipment, players would need both superb strength and luck. This was also the reason why, after frontline players reached level 100, the various powers of God's domain would start frantically investing in Tier 3 experts and master lifestyle players. Past level 100, quantity no longer mattered. Instead, what mattered the most was quality. One could say that Tier 3 experts and master lifestyle players were the true foundation of the various powers. Without Tier 3 experts and master lifestyle players, level 100 plus weapons and equipment at the fine gold rank or better would be inaccessible. Meanwhile, if a guild did not possess top-tier level 100 weapons and equipment, how was it supposed to develop? Level 100 plus monsters weren't easy opponents, especially after players reached level 105. Before reaching level 105, players could still rely on dark gold weapons and equipment that were below level 100 to fight monsters and bosses that were below level 105. However, that would no longer be possible at level 105. Past level 100, monsters would receive a significant improvement in strength every 5 levels. Without top-tier weapons and equipment of a corresponding level, Tier 2 players would not be able to contend with monsters and bosses of the same level at all. Only Tier 3 players would be able to. However, players capable of getting promoted to Tier 3 as soon as they reached level 100 were extremely rare. Moreover, although Tier 2 players might have an easier time completing their Tier 3 promotion quest as their levels increased, they would still require the assistance of top-tier weapons and equipment to succeed. Guild Leader. I found a parchment that can't be appraised. Blackie said excitedly after picking up a parchment dropped by a Dragonkin warrior. He then handed it to Shurfeng, anticipation filling him. His appraisal had already reached the advanced standard and was only one step away from the master standard. An item that he could not appraise definitely wasn't ordinary. A parchment. After Shurfeng used omniscient eyes to appraise the parchment, surprise and joy filled him. Not bad. This is a magic trap design. A trap design? Blackie, however, was disappointed when he heard Shurfeng's words. How unlucky. I thought we got a design for a weapon or equipment. Traps were common in God's domain. Some players would even use traps to deal with field bosses. However, compared to magic arrays, traps were very much inferior. Some traps were even ineffective against monsters at Great Lord rank or above. However, Tier 2 players could easily deal with Lord-ranked monsters. Setting up traps to deal with a Lord would be a waste of time and materials. This is something very good, Shurfeng said, chuckling. In any case, have everyone keep an eye out for it. If any more drop, bring them to me. Also, have Melancholic Side prepare the materials necessary for making this trap. Prepare as many as possible. Most likely, every player in God's domain had suffered at the hands of traps before. In fact, many experts had been killed by traps. However, as players couldn't properly utilize traps against monsters, traps never gained much popularity among players. However, traps were almost guaranteed when exploring ruins in God's domain, so how could they be useless? The reason for everyone's misconception about traps being useless was simply current players being limited to using and producing basic traps. The materials and production method for basic traps were common and simple, so it was only natural that they had very little effect against monsters. As for why players were capable of making only basic traps right now, it was because the main god system intended for players to slowly adapt to and learn about traps before reaching level 100. However, after reaching level 100, the main god system would remove all restrictions on players. Naturally, this included the limitation on traps, and players would be able to make intermediate traps. Not only would intermediate traps use much rarer materials, but their production difficulty would also increase significantly. In return, however, their effectiveness against monsters would improve substantially. Let alone dealing with level 100 lords, intermediate traps could deal serious damage even to level 100 great lords and place them in a heavily injured state for a short time. Moreover, traps were more suitable for the general public than precious magic arrays, as they were much less costly to produce. During Shurfeng's previous life, Many Tier 2 experts had relied on intermediate traps to hunt high-ranking bosses and grind monsters. If not for these traps, the majority of Tier 2 players wouldn't have been able to survive in level 100+ neutral maps at all. Meanwhile, the design the Dragonkin warrior dropped was for the Countercurrent Swamp, a magic trap that was effective against monsters below level 120. When triggered, it would not only immobilize monsters for a brief period, but also reduce the reaction speed and basic attributes of the trapped monsters by 15%. Of course, the stronger a monster was, the less effective the trap would be against them. Even so, the Countercurrent Swamp was very useful against Great Lords below level 120. Past level 100, even Great Lord ranked monsters were considered bosses. Ordinary Tier 3 experts would have to flee if they came across a Great Lord of the same level. Soloing the boss would be impossible. With the magic trap, however, even Tier 2 players could kill level 100 Great Lords, so long as they had a sufficiently large team. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You alright, I'll notify the others about it, Blackie said, nodding. Even so, he still wasn't particularly interested in the magic trap. After all, he didn't believe the Countercurrent Swamp's effects could compare to those of a magic array. Following which, Shifeng had his team slaughter the Dragonkin armies that they came across. He did not rush to the Cold Spring Forest Central region. After one day of steady grinding, Shifeng obtained another 4 trap designs. 2 were for the Countercurrent Swamp while the other 2 were for a physical trap called Burning Fire. Physical traps had many more weaknesses than magic traps. For example, they were quite useless against flying monsters. However, physical traps also had very obvious benefits. For example, they could be used to target a group of monsters. Moreover, they could cause very high amounts of damage continuously, so long as a monster remained trapped inside them. If magic traps and physical traps were properly paired up, even Tier 2 players could live a profitable life in level 100+ neutral maps. They would be inferior to Tier 3 players only when it came to raiding dungeons. Meanwhile, after the team killed another level 102 Dragonkin warrior, a purple glow enveloped the bodies of many members as these people reached level 100. The invisible chains that previously bound these players also shattered. Chapter 23-21. Superior Mythic. The players that had reached level 100 were astonished. My attributes are so high, and I feel so much more coordinated than before. That's not all that's changed. My senses are so much sharper and more realistic. In this state, my combat power has increased by at least 30%. Amazing! There's such a huge gap between level 99 and 100. Once I complete my Tier 3 promotion, Tier 2 experts under level 100 won't stand a chance against me. Ordinary players might not sense the changes that occurred when they reached level 100 right away, but Yin Tianqing and his companions noticed the changes immediately. They were stunned when they did. None of them had realized how great the difference was between level 99 and 100 before now. After leveling up once, their combat power had reached a whole new standard, and this was considering that most of their weapons and equipment were still level 95. If they equipped level 100 weapons and equipment, their combat power would skyrocket. Naturally, there was a major difference between level 95 and level 100 equipment. The level 100 mysterious iron items they had obtained after slaying the Dragonkin made that obvious. A level 100 mysterious iron weapon's attack power could almost rival that of a level 95 dark gold weapon, and the basic attribute bonuses were even slightly higher. It was easy to imagine how much their attack power, defense, and basic attributes would rise if they fully geared themselves with level 100 fine gold weapons and equipment. Furthermore, they had yet to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests. Now that a number of us have reached level 100, Guild Leader, we should start raiding level 100 team dungeons, Blackie eagerly suggested after experiencing the changes due to his new level. They hadn't even dared consider setting foot in a level 100 team dungeon previously. Dungeons monsters were far stronger than monsters in the fields, after all, and without Shifeng's help, they had barely held their ground against level 100+ field monsters before reaching level 100. Trying to raid a level 100 team dungeon would have been suicide. However, they had grown considerably stronger after leveling up, especially the players with epic weapons and equipment. These players' combat power had risen by far more than a mere 30%. Now they'd have no issues taking on a dozen or so Dragonkin warriors. Even without Shurfang's help, they definitely qualified to challenge level 100 team dungeons. Not only could they test their newfound strength by successfully raiding such a dungeon, but they'd also acquire high-quality level 100 weapons and equipment. In addition, their achievement would help spread Zero Wings' fame across the eastern continent, maybe even throughout God's domain. The other level 100 players voiced their agreement with Blackie's suggestion. They were all eager to challenge a level 100 team dungeon. Don't get so excited just yet. The system's restrictions on your bodies have been lifted now that you've reached level 100, so your physical condition is slightly different. Fight the Dragonkin first and give yourselves a chance to adapt, Shurfang said, shaking his head. Smiling, he continued, if you're so eager to test your new limits, I know the perfect place for you to do that. Players' combat power would substantially increase upon reaching level 100. They could now use their 5 senses and reaction speed to its full potential. But exerting all of their strength wasn't an easy task. Even Domain Realm experts would need quite some time to adjust, not to mention Refinement Realm experts. Shurfang had only been able to adapt so quickly because he was most familiar with this body. Although there were some minor differences between his current form and the body he had used during his previous life, he had sensed and adapted to these minor changes easily as a Domain Realm expert, perfectly exhibiting his full potential. A perfect place to test our strength? Where is it, Guild Leader? Kola excitedly asked. Unlike the others, he carried the Titan Guard, a fragmented legendary shield. Once he reached level 100, the restrictions on his shield had also vanished. As a result, he sensed a massive boost to his combat power. Overall, he had likely improved more than anyone else on the team. A superior mythic boss's lair, Shurfang announced, gesturing to the Cold Spring Forest Central region. Every member of the team was stunned when they heard Shurfang's answer. God's domain's mythic monsters weren't equal in terms of strength. Among them, superior mythics stood at the apex of their kind, wielding even more power than mythic-ranked archaic species. Everyone here was an expert, and they all had an idea of how powerful mythic monsters would become after level 100. Trying to challenge a level 100 mythic monster before they reached Tier 3 was tantamount to throwing themselves into the jaws of death, let alone challenging a level 100 superior mythic. Relax. I'm quite confident that one will be victorious, one Shurfang assured them, chuckling at his carrot now. Take some time to adapt to your new bodies. A Tier 4 dragon was an incredibly powerful being, but he had his heavenly dragon's breath. The ring was capable of suppressing dragons to an intense degree. Including Anna and Kite's assistance, they definitely had a chance of defeating the monster. Hearing that Shurfang was confident of their victory, his teammates breathed a sigh of relief. They obediently followed their leader's orders and used the nearby Dragonkin as training dummies. After around 4 hours of training, the team had a basic grasp of their unrestricted strength. Once his team was ready, Shurfang led them toward the Cold Spring Canyon. The Cold Spring Canyon was far more dangerous than the Cold Spring Forest's other areas, home to many level 103 and 104 Dragonkin. Even level 105 Grand Lord ranked Dragonkin commanders wandered the area. If Zero Wings members had come here before reaching level 100, they would have died the moment they aggroed a Dragonkin commander. Fortunately, Kola could single-handedly tank one of these Grand Lords at level 100, preventing the Dragonkin from targeting any of his comrades. Once he had a hold on the Dragonkin commander's aggro, the rest of the team slowly shaved away the Grand Lord's HP, eventually killing it. When Blackie looted the Dragonkin commander, he obtained the Dragontooth pendant, a level 100 fine gold necklace. Its basic attributes were more than 2 ranks higher than a level 95 dark gold necklace, and it increased the power of the wearer's dragon bloodline. Kola ended up winning the bid for the necklace, and when he equipped it, not only did it increase his basic attributes, but it also improved the purity of his dragon blood, improving his physique. Shurfang and his team finally reached the heart of the Cold Spring Canyon after another 6 hours or so of combat. He then retrieved the transfer stone he had received from the Adventurers Association and began to chant the incantation. The transfer stone transformed into violent energy that pierced an invisible barrier before Zero Wings' main force. As the barrier shattered, it revealed a paradise. Zero Wings members could hear birds chirping and smell fragrant flowers, and as they entered the space, They felt a pleasant sensation encompass their bodies. The fatigue from their long hours of grinding faded quickly as their stamina and concentration began to recover. This space was nothing like the outside world. However, before any of them had the chance to inspect this area, a horrific aura washed over them, so intense that it nearly knocked them on their backs. A dragon! Turning toward the aura's origin, their gaze rested on a 30-meter-tall infant dragon. Protected by its snow-carrot scales, the infant dragon was sound asleep. Every breath it took was powerful enough to shake the entire area. Ice Dragon Heathwaite. Dragon Mythic Level 101 HP 1,840,000/184000000. When the team saw Heathwaite's statistics, they had no doubt that if this infant dragon wished it, it could likely shatter this entire space, plunging it into the void. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Dragons had always been the symbol of destruction in God's domain. The various NPC cities' libraries contained a vast amount of information on these beings, always depicting dragons as natural disasters that could bring about the downfall of an entire country. If there hadn't been so few dragons in existence, they would likely have become God's domain's absolute overlords. Are we really going to raid a dragon guild leader? Kola asked, gulping as he watched the slumbering ice dragon. For a moment, Kola wondered if Shurfeng were playing some kind of joke on them. Even if he were tier 3, Heathwaite could likely kill him in one hit, much less now. That's right. That's what we're going to raid. Shurfeng nodded after taking a deep breath. He then pulled 2 summon guard scrolls from his bag and summoned Anna and Kite. Chapter 23-22 Draconic Spell. Heathwaite was a tier 4 dragon, and normally, Shurfeng would have tried to stay as far away from it as possible. Heathwaite might merely be an infant dragon, but it still stood at the peak among tier 4 beings. It was no exaggeration to say that this dragon was invincible among tier 4 beings of the same level. Even 1,000 tier 3 players would meet their doom if they encountered a tier 4 infant dragon of the same level, let alone tier 2 players. The gap between their life ratings was simply too vast. Normally, only tier 4 heroes, who had passed a trial of God and received a god's blessing, would have the strength to contend with an infant dragon. However, Heathwaite was under a life curse, which significantly reduced the effects of its life rating. If that weren't the case, it wouldn't have only had 1.84 billion HP and only be categorized as a monarch-ranked boss. Even a random dragon had the strength of a world boss, and a top-ranked world boss at that. Normally, defeating a true dragon without a tier 6 god-ranked player would be impossible. Otherwise, the players that had successfully defeated a dragon of the same tier wouldn't have been regarded as legends and inspiration for countless players in God's domain. As the 2 summoning arrays gathered the necessary mana, the level 106 summoner, Anna, and the level 105 swordsman, Kite, emerged. During the short break Shurfeng had taken after completing his tier 3 promotion quest, Anna and Kite had completed another epic quest. As a result, their weapons and equipment had changed. Previously, they had both worn epic equipment that could grow with them to level 100, but now they both had epic set equipment that would grow until they reached level 150. They had also both reached or surpassed level 105, and their basic attributes had undergone a considerable transformation. Despite the fact that Shurfeng had reached tier 3 and wore the disintegration armor, his attributes were no match for Anna's and Kite's. Once he had summoned his personal guards, Shurfeng retrieved the Bible of Darkness and called forth a demon. Shurfeng's Bible of Darkness was the real deal, so its power was unmatched. Moreover, as its user rose to a new tier, the Bible of Darkness would exhibit even greater strength. After a moment, a 20-meter-tall demon gate appeared before Shurfeng. As the demon gate slowly opened, a tier 4 great demon, enveloped in blue flame, stepped through. Blaze Demon. Dark Creature. Great Demon. Level 116 HP 420,000/420,000/0000 Wings. Main force members gasped when they saw the Blaze Demon. They then turned to stare at Shurfeng with incredulous looks. You're too vicious, guild leader. You can actually summon a great demon to do your bidding. The various superpowers would likely go crazy if they knew about this, Blackie said as he glanced at the Bible of Darkness in Shurfeng's hands. Blackie had seen the Bible of Darkness before, so he knew just how powerful it was. Its ability to summon Tier 3 demons was particularly useful to Tier 2 players. A Tier 3 demon would even be useful after players reached Tier 3. Such demons had many skills and spells and were far more powerful than ordinary Tier 3 summoned creatures. However, Blackie hadn't dreamed that the Bible of Darkness could summon a Tier 4 great demon once Shurfeng had reached Tier 3. This power was ridiculous. Tier 4 summoning scrolls were even rarer than epic weapons and equipment, and the various superpowers treated such items like priceless treasures, avoiding using them unless absolutely necessary. And yet, Shurfeng could summon a Tier 4 great demon with the Bible of Darkness at no cost. Although a great demon had far less HP than ordinary mythic monsters of the same level, its combat power would be far greater than ordinary mythic monsters. Alright everyone, get ready. The Blaze Demon will tank the Ice Dragon later during the raid. You guys only need to support and attack from the sidelines, Shurfeng announced, chuckling as he returned the Bible of Darkness to his bag. The Spirit Emperor, Fantasy Extinguisher, had caused a sensation throughout God's domain during Shurfeng's previous life due to the Bible of Darkness. With it, he had developed Fantasy Shrine from a first-rate guild into a superpower that could even suppress the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion in the Black Dragon Empire. Since Shurfeng now had the real Bible of Darkness, he had even greater power. The Bible of Darkness was the very reason that Shurfeng even dared to consider challenging the Cold Spring Forest's monarchs. He wouldn't have harbored the thought if he only had Anna and Kite to rely on. After all, a mythic-ranked monarch was even stronger than a Tier 4 hero. With Shurfeng's command, Zero Wing's main force members went to work. Once his teammates were in position, Shurfeng sent the Blaze Demon to charge at the Ice Dragon. Within seconds, the Blaze Demon was within 500 yards of Heathwaite. As the Blaze Demon approached, the Ice Dragon's eyes opened abruptly, and it woke from its slumber, turning its amber gaze on the intruder. Needing neither chance nor gestures, Heathwaite spread its jaws. With Heathwaite as the center, the Ice Dragon sucked a 300-yard radius dry of mana before a towering white beam shot toward the Blaze Demon. Tier 4 Dragon Breath. Compared to the Dragon Breath Shurfeng's Black Dragon Doppelganger had used, a true dragon's Dragon Breath was on an entirely different level. The Blaze Demon transformed into an ice sculpture before flying back over 500 yards. At the same time, the area around Heathwaite became a world of ice, the attack utterly transforming the terrain. Aside from Shurfeng, every member of Zero Wing's team was dumbfounded. They had all heard legends and details about dragons, but they hadn't actually seen one in action. At this moment, they finally understood what a dragon truly was. If they hadn't stood over 1,000 yards away, that Dragon Breath attack would have killed every one of them. Fortunately, the Blaze Demon had initiated the raid. Even so, the Blaze Demon had lost over 20 million HP after taking a direct hit from Heathwaite's Dragon Breath. All of you, snap out of it. Once you get close to the boss, make sure that you're spread out. Healers, throw everything you have at the Blaze Demon. Shurfeng barked. He couldn't help his sigh of relief as he watched the Blaze Demon break free from its icy prison, appearing mostly intact. If that Dragon Breath had heavily injured the Blaze Demon, this raid would be over. Neither Anna nor Kite could tank the Ice Dragon, and their combat power couldn't even compare to the level 116 Blaze Demons. They'd either die instantly or be heavily injured if they took a direct hit from a Tier 4 Dragon Breath. The Blaze Demon ran at Heathwaite again. Fortunately, Dragon Breath had a relatively long cooldown, and because of that, the Ice Dragon switched to using its claws to attack the incoming demon. The Blaze Demon proved to be no match for Heathwaite. Each time it blocked an attack, it lost over 8 million HP. Although the Blaze Demon launched a counterattack from time to time, its Tier 4 spells only dealt a few million damage. The two creatures' strengths were on completely different levels. Shurfeng only activated Miniature World and Ring of Brilliance to suppress the Ice Dragon and enhance his allies' combat power, once the Blaze Demon had secured Heathwaite's aggro. Unfortunately, Miniature World was barely effective against the Infant Dragon. However, Heavenly Dragon's Breath's Dragon Domination was fully effective, reducing the dragon's basic attributes by 20%. Once Heathwaite's basic attributes had been suppressed, Zero Wing's healers were barely able to keep up with the damage the Ice Dragon dealt to the Blaze Demon. Shurfeng also used Life Domain to restore the Blaze Demon's HP to full on occasion. For a time, the ice dragon was helpless against the summon demon, during which Heathwaite's HP continued to decrease under Zero Wings bombardment. 95%, 90%, 85%. However, Heathwaite was not an easy opponent, and it turned its dragon breath on a random target from time to time. The players who had failed to dodge the attack had become ice sculptures, losing all of their HP in the blink of an eye. Dragon Breath had even slain Turtledove, despite her active life-saving skill. As Heathwaite's HP continued to fall, the intervals between each Dragon Breath grew shorter. By the time Heathwaite's HP reached 30%, only a little over half of the team remained standing. Despicable ants. I'll burn you to ash. Heathwaite bellowed before chanting an incantation. A threefold magic array with a 500-yard radius then appeared above the ice dragon, plundering all of the mana within a 1,000-yard radius. Tier 4 Draconic spell, Meteorite Fall. Suddenly, a colossal meteorite, which blocked out the sun, descended from the magic array, growing larger as it emerged. When Zero Wings survivors saw this, they began to despair. A Tier 4 Draconic spell. Even Shurfeng's expression darkened at the unexpected sight. How is this possible? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Draconic spells were some of the most primitive spells in God's domain, beginning at Tier 4. Even dragons rarely possessed draconic spells of the same tier. Meanwhile, a draconic spell was even more powerful than a large-scale destruction spell, capable of rivaling the gods' divine arts. A single blow from such a spell could annihilate tens of thousands of creatures. Not even invulnerability spells could stop their devastation. Anna summoned the Valkyrie. Shurfeng shouted. Not even he had a countermeasure for a Tier 4 Draconic spell. Anna's Valkyrie was his only hope. Anna immediately began to chant her angel summoning incantation. Chapter 23 Valkyrie vs. Dragon. Anna finished the angel summoning incantation in 2 seconds, and the moment she did, a gigantic magic array appeared above her, no smaller than Heathwaite's meteorite fall. A Valkyrie with 3 sets of pure white wings then emerged, landing before Anna. A Tier 4 higher Valkyrie? When he saw the upgraded version, Shurfeng was stunned. Angel summoning was Anna's legacy skill, and Shurfeng had always treated it as his final trump card since the skill allowed Anna to summon a Valkyrie that was 2 tiers higher than her. When Anna had been a Tier 2 personal guard, she had been able to summon a Tier 4 Valkyrie. Now that Anna had reached Tier 3, she should logically be able to summon a Tier 5 Valkyrie. With such a powerful ally, Zero Wings' remaining team should have no problem suppressing a Tier 4 infant dragon. However, Anna's Valkyrie was still only Tier 4. The only difference between the previous Valkyrie and this one was the extra set of wings. Angels' wings represented their status. An angel with 3 sets of wings was considered a higher Ankh, with 4 sets were considered archangels. In terms of life rating, archangels rivaled dragons, while higher angels were slightly weaker. But before Shurfeng had any time to ponder the matter, the meteorite above them had nearly completed. Block it! Shurfeng couldn't care less about the Valkyrie's status at the moment. He immediately commanded Anna to send her Valkyrie to stop Heathwaite's meteorite fall. The higher Valkyrie began to chant an incantation as soon as Shurfeng gave the command. The higher Valkyrie's incantation was unique. Rather than draw mana from her environment, it drew on a primitive form of mana from the void. In less than a second, a dazzling golden spear of thunder manifested in the Valkyrie's hands. An origin spell. Shurfeng was ecstatic to see the spear of thunder form from the void's mana in the Valkyrie's hands. Origin spells were the most primitive form of magic in God's domain. They were the root of all spells, capable of rivaling divine arts. However, humanity had lost track of origin spells due to repeated wars between the gods. Shurfeng had never expected the higher Valkyrie to use such magic. Before Shurfeng could get over his excitement, the giant meteorite, so large that it covered the sky and so heavy that it shattered space around it, began to descend. It looked as if Armageddon had begun for a moment, and Zero Wings members fell further into despair. As the meteorite began to fall, the higher Valkyrie finished her incantation. She then threw her spear at the meteorite. Soundlessly, The thunder spear transformed into a streak of golden light as it struck the incoming meteorite. Boom! The moment the two attacks met, the impact caused a powerful explosion. The resulting shockwave was so powerful that it nearly lifted the players below off their feet. The gigantic meteorite disintegrated into countless, smaller meteors that rained down, creating craters as they struck the ground. Every meteorite was nearly as powerful as a Tier 4 large-scale destruction spell. Zero Wings members gaped as they watched the stones slam into the ground. Tier 2 and 3 players were little more than ants in a battle of this scale. If this battle had taken place in a city, rather than in this special space, the spell's residual effects alone would be more than enough to level half the city. After blocking Heathwaite's meteorite fall, the higher Valkyrie shifted her attention to the ice dragon itself. She formed another spear of golden electricity in her hands before vanishing. By the time Zero Wings players realized where she had gone, the Valkyrie had appeared before Heathwaite. Tier 4 Superior Instantaneous Movement. Not only did Superior Instantaneous Movement have more range than the normal spell, but there was also almost no delay between the caster's disappearance and reappearance. Moreover, the spell didn't affect the ambient mana, making it impossible for enemies to determine the caster's destination. When she appeared before Heathwaite, the higher Valkyrie thrust her spear at the ice dragon. The attack was so fast that not even Shurfong would have enough time to react. If that attack struck him, he'd die instantly. However, Heathwaite was a dragon and reacted instantly, countering the golden spear with a rage-filled claw strike. Boom! The impact of the collision created a deafening boom that echoed throughout the area. Surprisingly, the Valkyrie's strength was too much for Heathwaite, and the infant dragon stumbled 2 steps backward. After suffering this humiliating blow, Heathwaite turned a wrathful glare on Shurfong. Heavenly Dragon's breath suppression on dragons was simply too powerful, and the passive ability had plundered 20% of Heathwaite's basic attributes. Heathwaite already suffered a life curse, so its strength was slightly lower to the higher Valkyries. Now Dragon's domination affected it as well. It was no match for the summoned angel. Good. Everyone attack with everything you've got. Shurfong quickly shouted when he realized that Heathwaite was thoroughly suppressed. He had originally planned to use angel summoning only after Heathwaite had gone berserk, but he had been forced to use it early due to meteorite fall. Although Anna had risen to Tier 3, which strengthened her angel summoning, its duration had only increased from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. Unfortunately, Heathwaite still had nearly 30% of its HP remaining, and 15 seconds wouldn't be enough to kill it. Attack! Yin Tianqing shouted. Yin Tianqing realized the predicament they were in as well. He immediately activated his berserk skill and his trump card, Shadow Stink, a Tier 2 taboo skill. In a frenzy, Yin Tianqing transformed into 3 streams of fog, attacking the ice dragon and dealing over -70,000 damage with each hit. Occasionally, the fog streams landed a critical hit, dealing over -150,000 damage. The rest of Zero Wings survivors activated their trump cards as well, with the weaker players dealing around -50,000 damage, while the stronger members of the team, such as Zhao Yueru, dealing upwards of -200,000 damage. Zhao Yueru's critical hits even dealt over -500,000 damage to the ice dragon. Her Tier 3 fire-type spells were a massive advantage in this raid. However, Shurfeng's DPS was undoubtedly the highest. After activating Heavenly Dragon's power, his strength could even surpass an ordinary mythic monster's, and as a result, he dealt over -1 million damage, even without fire-type skills or spells. When he used Void Slash, he instantly devoured over 10 million of Heathwaite's HP. With the higher Valkyrie, Anna, Kite, and the Blaze Demon attacking as well, Heathwaite's HP rapidly decreased. 25%, 20%, 15%. The higher Valkyrie continued to suppress Heathwaite after the dragon had gone berserk. However, she didn't deal quite as much damage. When Heathwaite's HP dropped below 10%, the higher Valkyrie's duration ended, and she vanished. Humans, you're dead. Heathwaite bellowed as the higher Valkyrie disappeared. The ice dragon swiped its tail at the Blaze Demon and Anna's Holy Knight, sending both of them flying. It then swiped a claw at Anna, ignoring the Blaze Demon completely. The ice dragon intended to rid itself of the most troublesome opponents before dealing with the remaining pests. Even without her army of summoned creatures, Anna's DPS was exceptionally high. With her summoned creatures, she was the infant dragon's most challenging opponent. Although Anna's spells could overwhelm ordinary mythic monsters, they were utterly useless against the berserk Heathwaite. Don't think you can take out our main DPS so easily. Suddenly, Shurfeng appeared before Anna and activated his disintegration power, swinging Killing Ray at Heathwaite's incoming claw. The moment Shurfeng activated disintegration power, it cancelled out Heavenly Dragon's power. In return, however, the ability temporarily elevated Shurfeng to Tier 4. Not only did he now wield Tier 4 strength, but his physique, reaction speed, and skills had risen as well. Boom! When the attacks collided, Shurfeng stumbled 3 steps backward due to the impact, losing more than 50,000 HP. He was still at a disadvantage, but he had successfully blocked Heathwaite's berserk attack. When that attack had failed, Heathwaite responded with another claw strike. This time, however, the Ice Dragon activated a skill in the process. Tier 4 skill Sky Splitter. 5 razor-sharp claws flew toward Anna from different directions, each with more power than the previous claw strike. As soon as Shurfeng steadied himself, he executed Lightning Flash to counter the attacks. Executing the secret technique proved far easier after his forceful upgrade to Tier 4, and he sent 17 sword lights at the approaching claws. Thunk, thunk, thunk. A series of explosions blew apart the ground around Shurfeng, but even after all 5 attacks, he had only stumbled back 3 steps. He also only lost around 200,000 HP. Even at Tier 3, Shurfeng had over 1,700,000 HP, far less than he currently had. Losing 200,000 HP was nothing life-threatening. After watching Shurfeng pin down the Ice Dragon, his teammates breathed a sigh of relief and continued their frenzied assault against Heathwaite. Time passed quickly. As the battle progressed, Heathwaite's attacks grew stronger, but with the Blaze Dragon and the Holy Knight's help, Shurfeng kept the Ice Dragon in check, preventing it from harming Anna or Kite. However, the team suffered the occasional casualty when Heathwaite fired its dragon breath. 5%, 4%, 3%. When disintegration power's duration ended, Shurfeng followed it up by activating Power of Darkness and Blade Awakening, relying on his twofold berserk's effects to tank Heathwaite's attacks. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. When less than 5 seconds of Shurfeng's twofold berserk remained, Heathwaite's HP had fallen below 7 million. Meanwhile, fewer than 30 players were still standing, and the surviving healers could no longer keep up with the Ice Dragon's damage output. Die! Shurfeng activated Divine Providence and swung Killing Ray for a final blow. Lightning Slash. A massive lightning bolt sliced through Heathwaite's neck, leaving a deep gash across its throat. That lightning bolt also destroyed the last of the infant dragon's HP. Chapter 23-24. Ice Dragon's loot. Everyone's experience bars exploded with the XP, as Heathwaite's colossal body crashed to the ground. A level 100+ mythic boss would already provide a lot of EXP, and as a monarch-ranked boss, Heathwaite would award even more. In the end, the 24 or so survivors watched as their experience bars rose beyond 90%. Although they had only reached level 100 less than a day ago, they were almost at level 101. Shurfeng was now at 63% of level 101 as well. The EXP from the Ice Dragon alone was worth nearly 3 days of normal grinding. It's finally dead. And I thought we were finished, Blackie said, sighing deeply as he plopped down on the ground. He was ecstatic that they had finally won. Near the end of the raid, Heathwaite's defense and attack speed had steadily increased. At one point, Shurfeng hadn't even been able to pin down the Ice Dragon with the Blaze Demon and Holy Knight's help. Moreover, Heathwaite's battle recovery generated over 10 million HP every 5 seconds, and as a result, they had barely moved the infant dragon's HP bar toward the raid's end. Yin Tianqing and the others felt like survivors of some great disaster. None of them wanted to imagine how the raid would have gone without Shurfeng's Bible of Darkness and 2 personal guards. When Heathwaite had died, it had dropped over 100 items beside its corpse, forming a small mountain that radiated waves of intense pressure. It's so powerful. This is the first time I've ever seen items that emitted such intense pressure. I wonder what kind of items dropped? Maybe there's a legendary item. Everyone stared at the mountain of loot with glowing eyes, and when they heard mention of a legendary item, the eager light in their gazes grew even brighter. They all forgot about their exhaustion for a moment, wanting to charge forth and inspect the dropped items. The strongest known item at this stage of the game was Fragmented Legendary rank, which everyone assumed Shurfeng possessed. However, Zero Wing's main force members knew the truth. There was more than one Fragmented Legendary item. Naturally, this was a guild secret. Exposing this truth would only invite God's domain's various powers to target Zero Wing, and only an expert of Shurfeng's caliber could openly own a Fragmented Legendary item without having to fear for his life. If anyone else were in his position, they wouldn't even dare to set foot outside of an NPC city. Epic items couldn't even compare to the benefits a Fragmented Legendary item provided, much less a true legendary item. Based on what players had learned from the game's libraries, every legendary item in the game had the strength to decimate heaven and earth. With such an item, players would have the power to transcend tiers. Before their fight with Heathwaite, these players wouldn't have been so concerned about such a power, convinced that they could bridge the gap between tiers with high enough basic attributes, but now they understood what that kind of strength truly meant. Without the strength to transcend tiers, Tier 3 players had no hope of contending with superior mythic bosses. Alright, let's resurrect our fallen. Shurfeng simply chuckled when he saw the hunger in everyone's eyes. He found their assumptions hilarious. Obtaining a legendary item with so little effort was impossible, and after level 100, weapons and equipment drop rates decreased considerably. On average, even mythic bosses' loot would consist of fine gold weapons and equipment. One would have to be incredibly lucky to acquire dark gold weapons or equipment from a mythic boss. However, Shurfeng had to admit that he was surprised by how much Heathwaite had dropped. This was the first time he had felt such an incredible pressure from a boss's loot as well. Having received their orders, the surviving team members pushed aside their curiosity for the moment and began to resurrect their teammates. Fortunately, a monarch boss's lair was similar to the space within dungeons. Even if players died here, they'd only lose 10% of their EXP, and only 5% if a healer revived them. Thus, the level 100 players that had fallen hadn't dropped back to level 99. While his companions revived, Shurfeng organized the infant dragon's loot. Amazing! Is this a benefit for the first kill? Shurfeng was stunned as he examined the items. His only aim in killing Heathwaite was to complete his crusade quest and become Cold Spring Canyon's lord. He hadn't expected to gain much from the raid itself, yet he was elated that he had chosen this monarch boss to raid. The ice dragon had dropped a total of 121 items, which was normal for a monarch. However, the item's quality far exceeded Shurfeng's expectations. There were as many as 24 inferior legendary materials among the loot, all necessary for producing epic and fragmented legendary items. Even without a design for such items, these materials could increase one's production success rates when crafting level 100 dark gold items. Level 100 plus dark gold items were incredibly rare in God's domain, only slightly more common than epic items under level 100. They'd still be rare even after Master Lifestyle players gained the ability to craft level 100 plus dark gold items. The required materials for producing such items were incredibly precious. They only dropped from powerful bosses, and each boss dropped very few at a time. Moreover, the production success rate for level 100 plus dark gold items was very low. Advanced Master Lifestyle players would only have a theoretical success rate of 35%. Every player that focused on their subclass knew that theoretical success rates were nowhere near the actual success rates. It was merely the highest possible success rate players could achieve. In practice, a minor deviation in the process could reduce the success rate to 20% or 30%. If one included an inferior legendary material in the process, however, their production success rate with level 100 plus dark gold items would increase by at least 5%. With these 24 materials, Zero Wing could produce a dozen or so level 100 plus dark gold items. Surprising Shurfeng further, Heathwaite had also dropped legendary materials. The Ice Dragon's Claw. Countless Grandmaster Forgers dreamed of obtaining this item. Dragons were one of the rarest types of monsters in God's domain, and they were immensely formidable. Acquiring a dragon's claw was nearly impossible. When used to forge weapons, dragon's claws were godly materials. As long as the player made some minor modifications to the claw, they could easily produce an epic weapon, even without an appropriate design. If they had an epic weapon design, they could craft a fragmented legendary weapon by using a dragon claw as the base material. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Any dragon claw that had appeared on the market during Shifeng's previous life had easily fetched the price of 2 fragmented legendary items in an auction. After all, one could sacrifice 2 random fragmented legendary items to secure a weapon of the same rank that was more compatible with its wielder. And Heathwaite had actually dropped 2 ice dragon's claws. Why wouldn't Shifeng be excited? It was no wonder why the ice dragon's loot had radiated such an incredible pressure. Aside from materials, Heathwaite had dropped 5 dragon's blood vials that could boost Cola and Alluring Summer's dragon bloodlines, further strengthening their Dragonslayer classes. While Shifeng appraised the several designs the infant dragon had dropped, one result left him utterly dumbfounded. How is this possible? A flying ship design. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.